if you're the audience, but we will be in session. Public comment session. Do any of you have anything you would like to say before the meeting starts?
Well, I'd like to just comment very briefly,
Okay.
because we don't want to keep going to 7:30 all the time. Greg, thank you. Thank you. We're nice enough to work with, Todd was nice enough to work with us and detail out the cost comparison. Now, I can make a big case that this isn't far enough to help developers. I can make a big case the other way, that that goes too far. But actually, it's right down the fairway. And in all fairness, it was a little bit better than what we asked, and it's a little bit different than what we asked. I think the template that you have for incentives, if it's in a form, easy to calculate, put in the numbers, it's on a website, you'll be so far ahead of these other utilities around here to where developers can easily be attracted. So we have committed to you in the past that we will participate in helping invite friends out to be acquainted with these new policies. But we're very supportive, and I hope you haven't been offended by our probing, but a lot of changes have happened, and it's huge. It's very impactful. And one or two little changes, but these are lots of good, solid changes. And so it's made us be in a position to go ahead with ours, and Nikki's committed to an actual timeline now. And so kudos to you guys, and we appreciate the accommodation on ours, but we guarantee you we're going to work hard to get this message out on with our developer friends. We want the community to grow. And thank you for your accommodation.
Thank you, and we're certainly all pulling for the project down there, Nikki. First item is the approval of the minutes. Everyone has had a copy, had time to look at them. Are there any changes or comments? Hearing none, the minutes are approved as presented. We'll also have copies of all of the vouchers, the voucher report for the month. Are there any corrections anyone has? Yes.
The questions we may have said before, there's a number of large Dudley, can you roll up one more page?
One more, two more, just tell me where you want to go.
You got a written copy there if you want to look at it on that, Steve.
Oh,
Cash transfer?
yeah, cash transfers. There was a number of those that I just didn't know what they were, and they were large.
Dudley. I mean, and I appreciate you asking that, because it's always a good question, and it always gives us an opportunity, because what does that mean? You know, is that Aruba or what?
Don't let it scare you. We have several bank accounts, and for example, we have a bank account at Regions where they collect our payments. We have a bank account that solely collects online payments and kiosk transfer payments, because we don't want these accounts to get so huge where they could easily be accessed or stolen. So we go in and we clean them out, and this will be several accounts where they've paid. We go in, clean them out, and transfer them to our general fund.
Which is then falls under the collateralized demand deposits, and then we sweep that in order to get the maximum return.
Okay, thanks.
Any more questions or comments? If not, the voucher report is approved as presented. Now we'll go to the financial reports. Dudley?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before you have the revenue expense summary for the fiscal year through February 2019. For the month of February, the electric department had a pretty good month, $485,000 net income. The Water and Sewer Department had a $1,251 income for the month. If you look at the year-to-date numbers, the electric department is $670,000 ahead of the forecast. The big difference there is our sales less our power cost. Those being so far different, that makes up the big part of that $670,000. Our expenses are about $78,000 more than we had anticipated, and the other income is the interest income. With the interest rates coming up and us building up a little bit of cash, we're about $51,000 ahead. If you look at the water and the sewer department, it's $117,000 ahead of the forecast, but again, that's because of that grant money that we received early right here in this. About $270,000 of that $293 is the grant money, which we had budgeted, but we hadn't budgeted for later. We're really about $163,000 behind the forecast, mainly because our expenses have just been way more than we anticipated with pumps and pump repairs and line maintenance and so forth. All that just adds up in a hurry. Our water sales are $26,000 under what we anticipated for this time of year, and as I've told you before, rain has a way of impacting that. Sewer sales are pretty much dead on though. Both departments are fine. I mean, as I said all along, the water and sewer is not going to get back to the black as far as the state's concerned, and that's why we're going to have to look at rates in this upcoming budget. And that's all I've got, unless you've got any specific questions.
Are we going to have a workshop or a discussion at some point about what the proper rate adjustment would be?
Yes, and that's something Greg and I have talked about earlier. We're going to have to focus on that.
The word is pivot. That's extremely important that we pivot to that, because that's a process, and we've already done some preliminary, but we need to get finished with where we're going and the policies that are in place to assess the impact, and then how do we recover that. So we're looking to very much to put as much of this to bed as we can, so we can focus.
Sounds good.
Just a quick comment to that. Week and a half ago, gentleman in our subdivision late one afternoon, his sewer stopped up. You guys were out there post haste, spent most of the night getting him straightened up, and he is most thankful.
Thank you.
And the electrical people did a really good job with Charlie Lyons' cabin out at the lake. I think Charlie called you about that.
We love Charlie, but he got the same service that everybody else would do, but I don't tell him that. Bones called one time, got me in the operations center, and he said, Greg, I said, I know you can't do anything, but I've got folks over here for dinner. We're just trying to figure out if we need to go out. And we're about ready to do a test. I said, well, hang on, Bones. And they did a test, the lights came on, and he thought I did that. He was so thrilled. I said, are they on there? I said, oh, God, Greg, you're the best. So we don't share that with him either if you don't care.
Real quick, I do have one question. The gentleman that started Steel
We'll get to that. Thank you, though.
Okay, thank you, Dudley. Move on now to the project status reports. Excuse me?
Yes, sir.
Start with engineering.
You know, you'd think I would have had that ready to go, because I'm first out of the box here.
Well, you had other things to talk about.
Thank you for covering for me. All right. Aerial cable in Norris. This is our phase 3, and this has been ongoing. This project continues to go well. It's our veteran electric system in Norris, and the last phase, which is a multi-year phase project, is nearing its end, and we expect to be completed on time by the end of June. But I will tell you that we've had some discussion with a very nice gentleman, an articulate gentleman, had issues with the steel poles. They would prefer well, I think first choice would be an invisible pole. Second, he would have preferred wood going back instead of steel, and we tried to tell him that the accommodations that we make for NARS, which are considerable, is the area cable that we have there, and also the fact that our normal practice is to move all of our lines to the street right away. So it becomes a lot easier to patrol when we have an outage and also maintain, since we're not in behind people's houses. But Norris is the first electrified city. They've been a tree line since tree line was even Tree Line USA city. So we've tried to, as a three-phase, they were three-phase. Eventually, or originally, they even wanted to do DC there instead of alternating current, you know. So it was at a 4K, 4,000 volts originally, and that's why we have to bring it up to standard in order to provide that level of service. So all of that, I think they can understand. Certainly, the mayor understands, but this individual doesn't like the poles at all, and he's made that very clear. So I want to share with you that there's at least one out there, and I would say he could get some friends that would prefer to see something other than that pole, even if it was painted. So, but other than that, it's just going great. And we wrote him he emailed in, and I responded with a pretty long response, and I haven't heard anything since then.
Well, you would expect at Norris that they would want wood.
They would want underground, you know, first, I would think. All right, so the 795 on Longmire Road, this is where the accident occurred. I've got that in other business. I'll be glad to talk about it now if you would prefer. This is our lineman. The project is going well, and we ought to be complete with that on time also. The situation that we had last Tuesday, one of our premier linemen, and that's easy to say because any one that we picked, I would have said a premier lineman because they all are, and one of our premier foremen, which was easy because I would say that all of our foremen are premier. They're great guys and great what they do. And we are investigating what happened, but the bottom line is when we're stringing cable across, we had one phase already done, we were getting ready with the other, and what literally has to get done is that was 336 cable, which is a pretty good size cable. It goes into a sleeve where you put the old cable and the new cable together. And if you want to think shark bite, if you're familiar with that at all, it gives you a sense of, you know, it goes in, and once it's in, it's all the way in. And Mike was up in the bucket, and everything was rubbered up, certainly on the bottom, and that's what we're looking. There might be a T-clamp that we're eyeballing. We've got pictures of it, but that sleeve, either it wasn't fully seated, we're thinking now, or it was defective. But that cable came out, and there's a tail on that, and we're thinking that tail went up and maybe slapped something above him. And the way he was leaning in, we don't know, but we do know that he got hit going in the side, and it came out on the opposite shoulder. So he has got a burn, especially going through. I mean, they've got it sealed up, and then the flash, which occurred after that. So it's like I'm going to say a very, very hard sunburn. He would probably be more descriptive than that, but that got him to. I mean, when he came down in the bucket, he was a little bit confused. And this is a powerful guy. Think of Aquaman if you want to get a visual on this guy. He is stout. You may remember him, Zach. He was the one you said you didn't want to see in the
Dark alley.
In a dark alley.
Yeah.
He's very stout, and apparently he wasn't happy that they wanted to help him out of the bucket. So it took several to help him get there, and we got him to UT, and we were right down there with him. Obviously, he was very uncomfortable, and he flashed some on the side of his face. they helped shave some of his beard off, which I think he looks better, you know, but a great guy. And he was released yesterday. He came by the office, came by the warehouse to give the guys the shirt that he was wearing because it's got a big hole in it, you know.
Will there be any state or federal?
Oh, yes, we've invited, which we would want to do, we've invited Tosha to come in. They're coming Monday, and Mike is going to, I mean, we talked to him this afternoon. He's going to visit with the OSHA guy Monday, the Tosha guy rather. We'll talk with all of the eyewitnesses because we want to try to recreate. What we did with the sleeve is we didn't, because we want to know if it's defective, and the way you would do that is you would insert another cable. We didn't even want to do that because we wanted Tosha to see that pristine to determine whether it was a mechanical failure with the device or if it just wasn't fully seated in there. We know that played a part in it, but we're reconstructing everything. Then when we get that, when we get as close as we can to factually, for us to factually determine what happened, then we're gonna make sure that if things that should have been done that weren't done, we'll have a discussion about that, and whatever appropriate action we'll take at that time. Right now, we're just rejoicing that because it could have been, you know, because I don't want to downplay it. It could have been, we could have lost him. I don't know how you get from here to here without crossing the heart, you see. And they did scans internally, and all of that's good. All of that's good. So,
You mentioned the foreman. Was the foreman involved or just?
well, of course, the foreman's right there. The foreman was on the puller because you're.
Was he hurt? Was he physically
No,
injured?
that goes down with the safety devices. He was sitting on a puller that was grounded up, everything, because then we immediately start looking at what's done. That was grounded appropriately because if the cable became hot and he's sitting on the machine with the cable, that's 15,000 volts coming down there. You know, had it not been grounded appropriately, he would have felt that also, you say. But no, there was no problem with that at all. The personal protection equipment, that apparel that Mike was wearing, which we just in the past years tested and designed, also served to protect him personally. The glasses that he had on, the shirt was fire retardant and protective. All of that served the bucket itself, the way that's grounded and protected. The gloves that he had on, you know, protected him, but it just caught him in the side. And had he not had that fire retardant uniform on, then his clothes would have caught on fire. There's no doubt about that. So all of that is good, you know, and served to do what happened. But if there is contact with electricity, something failed, you see. It just doesn't come out of the sky unless lightning gets you. So whatever happened, there was a failure. And generally with electricity, it's more than one thing. Two things have to fail. Two things, because one, the sleeve goes out, and two, it hits something. So the first thing is the conductor's out of the sleeve. That's failure one. And failure two, whatever it hit, why was that energized? You know, to hit, or what could have or should have been reasonably done. And again, that's what will determine. We do know we got an experienced first-class lineman out there. We know that. And we do know we've got an experienced first-class foreman out there. Now we're going to just help determine for lessons learned and going forward And also, there's always accountability, appropriately and measured. If anything, should have that was done that couldn't have been done or wasn't done, then we're gonna find that out. First we take care of our guy. And then second, we reconstruct to the best of our ability, and then we go from there. And we'll go appropriately from there, whatever there is.
Is there a,
Sir?
is there a lessons learned forum in the industry to put that out for folks to read?
Oh,
once it's
absolutely.
issued?
When we do, and have safety meetings all the time. And part of those safety meetings is to discuss what happened somewhere else. We've never had a fatality here at CB. We've been very fortunate, but many utilities have not been that fortunate. But I tell you, this could have been the first one. I mean, I remember Red Simons was back probably in the early 70s. Remember, Red, and that's when he decided he was just going to go to the dozer after that. And he can clear everything from one end of the county to the other. And I remember we had a lineman sit down between two phases, because he thought that they were hot. Do you remember? You don't remember that. You remember that, and we couldn't believe it. So both of these are hot. Everything in front of him is dead. So he sits down on the cross arm. He's 8 inches. We came close there. And the same guy at one time came down, caught his clothes on fire and didn't burn him at all, but he had to go home and change and came back to work. So we've had some near misses. I guess everyone has some near misses. It generally takes 2 failures for a bad accident, and we're just going to find out what those are.
Greg, will you, on behalf of the board, extend to this young man our thanks for his dedication and our concern for his well-being and our admiration for his courage and bravery, and I think that's important.
As will the others. Thank you. So, I have now taken more time on this than anyone in history. Sunset Drive to Hillcrest, that's a pretty good sized cable there. That was approved last month, and what we're trying to do is increase our capability to transfer with this FLISR, and it's all of that's working good. That's progressing nicely, and we expect to complete that on time when within budget by the end of June. I would say we'll have that completed. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman, on that.
More questions? Thank you. Dan?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're still tracking the one project on upgrades to 2 pump stations in the Mariner Point subdivision. The contractor has accumulated his parts and pieces, and every time he's tried to mobilize it, we've had epic rainfall events, so he's still trying to get a time together when he can bring his crews in and install all the equipment within probably a couple of weeks and then move out. That's how he makes his money. So when he moves in, this project will clear easily, and we expect that within the next couple of weeks. So still the project should be completed in June, as we've got the estimate here, so I'm saying we're still on schedule.
Any questions for Dan? Okay, I think we have a purchase order to be approved.
So moved.
Let's hear what it is first.
Right, okay. This is a purchase order for 1 pump. It is to replace a pump in one of our largest wastewater stations. This pump actually exploded. They said they'd never seen a pump go like this. We did the investigation, sent it back to the representatives and the factory, and while they were working through that, and to get that pump repaired, of course, we had the rainfall events that we had, and we had bypass pumps in here and everything else, so we elected to purchase a new pump and hope to get approvals on this because of the location of this pump station, and it serves all of the development at the interstate. It is a critical pump station. 1 pump cannot handle the flows that we've got up there. We need a new pump in there, so we're going to order a new pump. We're going to take the repaired pump and use it as a standby. And if anything happens to one of the other pumps, we can switch them out and send that pump back. Right now, we've had one pump in there with a standby pump, and we've had all this rainfall, and so it's been costly with the standby pumps to make sure that station continues to convey the flow without any overflow. So I encourage you to approve this purchase order, even though it's a large amount. It's sole source because there's only one pump that'll go back in the hole this one came out of.
Is there a motion to approve
So
this?
moved.
Second.
Motion's been,
Dan, that didn't occur a couple of weeks ago when all my grandkids were here, did it?
all in favor, by the way, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Okay, next item is one that I think we do this once a year, don't we?
Yes, sir, it's required by the state, it's unclaimed property, and what it amounts to is customers pay deposits. They leave, they move off, we apply their deposit, they have a credit balance, we send them a check. Sometimes they're really small and they never get cash. Sometimes they don't leave us a proper forwarding address, so they never get to them. And we look for them and we can't find them, we hold them for a while, then we have to turn them over to the state as unclaimed property. The state holds them, puts them on their website, runs it in the Tennessean, says this property's out there for you to claim, and we have a right as a municipality to go in and ask for it back after they hold it for a period of time. Now, they charge us like a 25% admin fee and give us the rest back. We're then responsible for the full amount if somebody makes a claim, which happens once in a blue moon. So it's to our advantage to ask for the money back, and we hold the money instead of letting the state hold the money. And this year it's $6,355, which is higher than it usually is, but it's worth asking for. And like I say, if anybody comes in and says they've got a claim, we verify it and we give them their full amount
Most
back.
utilities don't because of the low amount. They just don't mess with it and just, but we probably, I don't know, 50,000, I guess, over the,
At least,
yeah.
'cause we've been doing it since the 80s, so.
Is there a motion to approve the request for the unclaimed?
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second? Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion passes.
I have to sign both of these, Charles.
You. Next item is CUB salary plan. I think we all received from Greg a salary plan which meets the, what we had been talking about, matches pretty much what the city of Clinton has all of the job categories and the ranges of the salaries for those. As I said in an email to you, I will make a motion now, that we implement this as the official salary plan for CUB and make it part of the personnel policy, make it available for all employees to see, have access to, probably the public also, since we're a public utility. And I also recommended that we have two changes to what Greg submitted or laid out. And the first is to add the job category of general manager so that we have all of the jobs covered. And the second change that I recommended was reducing the Director of Engineering and Operations down essentially to the same as accounting and finance, because that matches what we saw in the salary surveys that we got from TVPPA and APPA. That would, the salary top for that job in the surveys was 156.9. In this plan, it would be 175. So we have a fair amount of room there for growth if the job grows, if something is added to it. And that would put us in compliance with the the survey information that we got. So that is my proposal. Is there a second?
Can I make a comment to Greg?
Well,
Prior to the approval?
What is the right order?
You gotta second it before
Yeah, you gotta
you
second
open to
before you-
discussion.
I second.
Okay. Now, are there any comments or?
Greg, it's my opinion that should you hire a director of engineering under this salary plan, you ultimately promote him to deputy manager like Ernie was, it would dictate a relook at where he falls on this plan, and he would not necessarily be bound by the director of engineering description in this plan.
I would be in a position or an addition of responsibilities,
Yeah,
but
we ought to relook at it. If it occurs, that's different.
I offer these up, and I have to the board. These are the guidelines that I go by for those top people that are direct reports to me. And then there is a plan in place for every position here. When I first came here, there wasn't any. When I became Director of Accounting and Finance, I had a plan for every employee that was under me. When I became General Manager, then I expanded that to cover all three departments and all of the personnel. I still am firm in while these are the guidelines that I put down and the amounts that I put down have always been reasonable and pertinent to the individual. I shared with the board last month, our friends at KUB, they have for an engineer that is preferred to have a PE license, they go up to 156. This is just someone with a preferred, not a director's position, not a supervisor's. They'd like them to have 5 years' experience. 100. This is what I'm in. I'm trying to work with. I would resist any firm position or bookend that the board would put on me, as I thought we had squared away last month. I offer these to you. You will always know what I pay. There should be not be any surprises, but whatever it takes me, I'm now working on month 4 without a director of engineering and operations who also served as safety director. I'm working on month 4 because these have become the viewing. I'm better than Game of Thrones within the industry for viewing at this. I had a guy from KUB that met me at the hospital when I'm down there with Bavasset talking about this meeting and how they watch it at KUB. So for me to go into the market and try to pull a key person or promote from within and then try to fill that slot, knowing that there is such board involvement in trying to cap whatever it is that these positions provide, is counterproductive to what I believe is and has always been the responsibility of the general manager. So I offer that out to you, that this is what I hope to do, and in depending on who I get in order to attract and fill this position, you won't be surprised at an amount, but I would continue to encourage the board to allow me the prerogative to set salaries for the people that are below me.
Mr. Chairman, may I be recognized?
Yes.
I think it's redundant, and because in my estimation, Greg has the right to set salaries as he sees fit. He has provided what I will call a very high-end HR document, in my opinion, that shows job descriptions, a starting, the mid, but I also want to give the general manager flexibility. There may be a time that he needs to step outside of that, and he may be very well justified if somebody's coming after a top talent, KUB for example, and this person's mission critical, you might have a justification to be outside the range somewhere. And I would like to give the general manager the authority and the support to do that. And I think our role would be to review that when we go and look at the budget, or we certainly could ask to look at it. And if it's, I don't have a fear that we're out of line. And as far as exercising fiduciary oversight, I feel that we have met that duty and have met and really satisfied that fully. I think that I certainly would ask the general manager to be conscious of drafting a job description for himself, so it would help us to know what we're looking for. But I wouldn't be in favor of the motion because, number one, I think it's asked and answered, to use a legal term. Number two, I think that it's redundant because it's already in place. And number three, I'd like to allow the general manager the ability to deviate in a situational dependent, issue with an employee that I think we have to trust the general manager's judgment. I think we have to trust that he's doing what we're asking him to do, which is to run this in a business-like, efficient manner. But I think that everybody on the board has a spirit of make sure that we're in line, make sure that we're not out of adjustment. I think that's where this is coming from. At least that's where I'm taking it. And I think that our general manager and perhaps some of the employees have been really maybe overly worried or anxious or suspect about why is this happening. And I don't want that to happen. I want to alleviate the general manager's concerns. I want to alleviate our employees' concerns. I don't want to touch or harm morale. But at the same time, I think that comes with trust. I think it comes with the general manager trusting the board and general manager feeling comfortable that the board's motives are transparent. And I think that's important to building that trust, because I feel like from last meeting, to me, it was obvious there was some trust that wasn't there. And I think we got to cure that. And I feel that we've asked Greg to provide information, and he had it from start to finish, from chapter to verse, as I knew he would. And so I'd ask that we all work better on our communication, because a lot of that probably could have been resolved. But I do feel, and Mr. Chairman, respectfully, I do feel that it's redundant, and I just don't think it's necessary to vote on a motion, and I will relinquish the floor.
No, that's fine. So you feel that just having this as an informal document
I do.
and it doesn't need to be a part of a
I don't
personnel
think it
plan?
has to be formalized by the board. No, sir, I do not.
If I could speak also,
Yes.
I agree with what Zach's saying. He said it more eloquently than what I could have said it, but I agree with that. I think we're tying Greg's hands too tightly when he's operating from something that we've all said that we approve, where we think it's in line. And I don't think it needs to be any more than a formal document. I guess what I keep looking at is, what we're doing as a board was built on what boards before us have done. And we have to think about what boards after us will do. And I don't want to set something in motion that, somebody's got to undo what we've done. I think our concerns, or the concerns that were out there should be relieved by this document. But I don't want to tie Greg's hands or any other general manager in the future. That's not fair to tie hands
And
too tightly to where they can't do what they need to do.
And I largely agree with that. I think if we had seen this document, much earlier somewhere, that would have, a lot of the concerns would have gone away. But, because this is what I know that I was envisioning that we would have, was a document just like this. Steve?
Disagree slightly. Having spent 40-something years in businesses that had documented, usable salary plans that were there for a reason, I see value in having this as a formal document. Now, I also feel comfortable that if we want to add to this salary plan or this motion, a proviso that says we only ask that Greg notify the board should he go outside the limits on a hire.
Oh, I have no problem with that. I think that's absolutely, it wouldn't make sense to me.
That doesn't tie your hands,
Oh, yeah.
but it just.
I always want to give you all the information that you want. My philosophy always has been, the brighter the light, the better it is. So that there is no problem with transparency. To be informed is one thing.
And honestly, if you come and inform us that says, my new hire to replace Ernie, I'm offering him $14 million to start, we might say no to that.
And I appreciate the humor in that, but the inference has been made even before. I would judge me on my track record here, 40 years. I mean, what have I done to deserve or to be to have this issue of I'm going to go out and either internally or externally bring in Fulmer, in order to replace somebody. I just don't have the track record for that in all the 40 years that I've been
A lot of us
here.
don't know, a lot of us haven't been here 40 years. Some of us been here 13 months.
And as Charles says, this document's been before this board, not these five, but they have seen that. That's part of the problem with having a young, a board, I guess, that you don't have that level. But to go to your point, Zach, and I think it's appropriate, and I'm glad that in the months that you've been here, as you said before, we were able to dissuade a little bit of the, I see where they're coming from. I've provided, and it goes to Charles's second part of his motion, I worked up something that I thought would give you that sense of satisfaction of where we are and how in line we are. If I can, this won't take very long, because after Charles's email, I quickly tried to put some things together. These are 990s. I picked three other utilities within the valley. These you can get online yourself, or you can look at mine, and on the page 8, it has the CEO's W-2. So there's no ambiguity about what's being reported as some of these surveys done. So these are three utilities within the valley, Pennyrile, Clinton, Gibson, and Sand Mountain. And I tried to get some because part of what you look at is the number of customers. For electric, water, and sewer, we've got 40,000 when you include our water and sewer. Pennyrile has 47, Gibson has 38, Sand Mountain has 31. So these, I'm trying to get four within, the same sphere, so to speak, in terms of number of customers. Then you look at indices, because again, this is all part of the 990 form. They can't hide it. Where do we stack up as we look at these similar in size utilities.
Greg, this is not
They-
a personal thing. And
Well,
it's-
you
it's-
talked
it's-
about my salary though, and,
But that's not about your salary. It's like Steve said, and I came from the same corporate background where you just have personnel plans and salary plans that's out there, and most places don't have one person who stays for 40 years. And you want to have continuity when you go from one person to
I have no
another.
problem with that, Charles, but in your motion, you wanted to put a cap on mine. I'm trying to inform the board the dangers of doing that. If I were to win the lotto and go somewhere tomorrow, how that affects your ability to attract and retain the top people. These are local utilities. I went through this. I've just a few more slides because this goes to the very heart of where we are. It's the indices on how you track what we're doing compared to others that are of similar size. So our debt is extremely low. As you go on to the next slide, Dudley, you can help me with that if I'm not doing it. The net position, which is, now we're back, right? The net position,
We're on, let's see, on load factor.
I won't touch this anymore.
You and me are fighting each other here.
Okay. The net position, assets over liabilities, where we are in relation to these other three, higher is better, and we're at 99 million. The high is at 107, the low is at 61 million. Our net position is better. Now hit the next one, Dudley. Our load factor, and load factor means how are we doing and as far as utility within our system. It shows the lower it is, the higher is the best. We're at 66. The lower says that there are spikes. In other words, there's not enough kWh energy to offset the spikes. I say that to say that goes to the fact that we peak shave. So we have a much better utility within the system. At 66, we're the best of these four. Next one, Dudley. Line loss. Line loss, the EIA, which is the Administration for Energy Information for the U.S., says line loss typically on a distribution system is at 5%. Our line loss, every percentage point, is $600,000 annually that we pay to TVA. Sand Mountain, if we had the same line loss as Sand Mountain, we'd pay $1.1 million more each year to TVA for our energy. $966,000 if we were at Penny Ryle, and $642,000 at Gibson because we're at 3.13. The industry standard is 5. That goes with with these four. Certainly, it looks reasonable, and we're at 3.1. That is millions of dollars. Over a 5-year period, it's over $5 million at Sand Mountain. So that is real numbers. That you look at and how we line up. And finally, where we line up, Dudley, if you'll do the next one, is salary. Now, where we are in the indices at the very high end, the very best of all of these, and these are the things you look at: assets, liability, debt, load factor, and line loss, which affects millions of dollars. This is 2017 because that's what these are, 2017. So everything goes back to 2017. In 2017, my W-2 was $241,000. Penny Ryle was at 263, 267 at Sand Mountain, and 335 at Gibson. The guy at Penny Ryle, the manager at Penny Ryle, retired at $282,000. What you see at 263, he got hired in for more money than what I was making. The new guy got hired in. The manager the manager there was at 282. The new guy come in at 249, and I'm at 241. So there is that room. This only continues. This gap continues to grow. So when you say, where do you stand in relation to surveys, I invite you to look at the facts of where you can pull off on the internet and the 990s yourselves. These are facts. These are utilities that are near our size, and in every indice we are killing them, except for what you're paid. So you bookend your general manager on salary, you are limiting yourself into the quality of person that you're getting in here. And those indices that are hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars continue to decline because not any utility is Cub. What we're doing here, not any of these are doing. So I just offer that up to you. Don't bookend it. I understand where you think I ought to be. I'm just saying, don't put a bookend on this, so when you do go to the next, you want to attract, these are top managers. And that's what you want to get, or you can just get a body in here, and I'm telling you, if you do that, the system will suffer. That's all I've got to say towards that. But I will respond if you've got a question.
Greg, again, in my background, I've had to go to the wage and salary folks more than once and say, this is a particularly unique person.
Yes, sir.
With education, with background, and all of that, and we need to pay him this much to get him on board. And more than once, that has been approved and accepted. It's just a process you have to go through. And the wage and salary plan for that particular job is there. They have something to look at. And if I can make the right case, then they will say, okay, you know, we understand what you're saying, we buy into that, we understand the need, we'll approve paying this much above the salary plan. That process works.
Where the rub is, Steve, is I feel like for several years now, it's been inferred, and well, not even inferred, it's been pretty clear that my salary is out of line. And I want to provide the board with everything that I can to try to help you see that that is not the case. There are people that are general managers that make a lot less money than I do. There's no doubt about that. But the top performers, and I would submit that our utility is in that elite category. The top performers, they get the top money. So I push back a little bit on, well, we're paying him too much, or we're paying any of my people too much, when we bring to the table the what are millions of dollars documented savings that were we not here, that would have not happened. It's not like everybody's the same, because it's not. I mean, nobody in the valley has Flizzer. Nobody. And when you look at Todd across the way, I won't say Todd, but say if there's somebody on that side of the room, you know, and they are $20,000 less than what KUB is willing to pay for someone with 5 years' experience, hoping that they can research on Flizzer when we've got one of the architects over there. He could be out of here tomorrow. I'm saying we are not even, we're better than what I'm showing you here. And they're paying their people, and our people can go. We haven't raised up in Clinton I don't have one PE that is local in Clinton. Not because we don't want them, they're just not there. And we got Todd out of Dixon, we've gone to LMU and got Ron. I mean, we got Dan out of North Carolina, Colorado, or, you know, bounced around. All of that to get the team together to provide what we think is a superior system, what we know is a superior system. And I'm just saying, I want to make sure the board doesn't rely on information or a perception without having the facts. That's where I am on this. But in terms of how I inform you, for the people working under me, I love that part. For how you look at my salary, the good news is that's not my decision, that's your decision. So however you want to do it, but I just want to make sure you got a hold of the facts.
It's obvious if you follow the retirement of the ex-TVA head the other day, it is a unique industry in what they pay the top executives.
No question about it.
Far beyond what General Motors or anybody else would do. So you have to appreciate that performance does deserves more money. And I think the board would support your activities or your request for one of your people who is unique and somebody that we absolutely can't or don't want to do without.
The thing is, Steve, I wouldn't request it. That's the different of the rub. I would inform, not request.
Bad words on my part.
Okay.
You know, as long as you inform us that I'm gonna offer this guy X amount above the salary plan, and here's why, and the board agrees that those are valid, sound reasons, we would say, my opinion is, we'd say go. Or we'd say, no problem, I mean, it's already done, probably.
But, and I think we're dancing around semantics. I think to Greg's point, even though he's trying his best to talk me out of this, Greg's point is he has the authority to do that. And he does not need our approval to pay what he's paying. But we have the right to know.
Oh, yeah.
Right. There's
Absolutely.
the difference. And if we don't like what he's paying, our job
care
is
of
to
me.
relieve the general manager.
That's right.
And because that's just, I can't, that's the way I read the law, that's the way I read the code. And I think what we have in place, and again, both Steve, your comments and the chairman's comments are absolutely, I understand what you're saying. We need to have a formalized, sort of salary structure. We got one. The simple fact that the general manager has this in that form makes it a CUB work document. If we were in some sort of litigation and I filed a discovery request for work-related that would have to be turned over to me in litigation. So the simple fact, so I think we're asking for something that's already there, and I think there's a procedure already in place to remedy, a rogue GM that was going out and paying somebody outside the lines. I think that's what Greg, I think, is pointing, is like, I can't come to you and ask for permission because Greg's position is I don't think I have to, legal or otherwise. And I agree with Greg. Now,
Well, I don't think there would really, this issue would have been nearly what it is if we had seen this document a year ago or 2 years ago, or, whenever we started talking about a salary survey. But
Okay, if we're gonna rehash this, we're gonna be here another 3 hours.
Yeah.
So your motion on the floor
Well,
is,
I'm willing to withdraw the motion. If there is not support for having a salary plan here at CUB,
but
then,
I think there is. That's my point. I want to be clear. I'm not saying we don't have because I think the simple fact is we have a salary plan.
right here.
We have it. And it's been created by the general manager. It is a CUB document.
That's not salary,
It's a CUB policy.
list of salaries. No, that's not salary.
You don't think it's a salary plan?
That list right there, no, absolutely not.
Well,
What Greg provided for us the other day with extremely well-written job descriptions, time and grade steps, span of responsibilities and midpoint and high and low, that's a salary plan. That's what you would go back to and look at to see.
Well, it's my belief that that's there. It's my belief that that's in place. And there sits the general manager. Is that in place?
Yes, sir.
Well, but the fact that none of us knew it was there.
Well, we know now.
We do.
Actually, we knew it, we just hadn't seen it. I knew it was in place. I've been on the board 3 years.
and you hadn't seen it, right?
I trust Greg enough not to have to see
The
it.
board, this board, and you, Charles, specifically, you came in saying, I want a survey, which is different, is what do you have? What is in place? That question was never posed. I told this board, I have the job descriptions, I've got the salaries, I said that more than once, but that wasn't either, I didn't communicate that
And I didn't
well.
You communicated it numerous times because we had discussion about it as a board, and after board meetings, we've had discussions about it. But at the same time, we have to either trust our general manager or not trust our general manager.
Well, and there's trust in Verify. I mean, you can trust, but still, I think getting this document would have made a world of difference, 1 year ago, 2 years ago, at any point in time.
And you're right, Mr. Chairman, and that speaks to the miscommunication piece that I've alluded to, but what I deeply desire from this moment forward is to start looking at solutions in the future and not, you know, I can't help what happened in the past. I can't help what I didn't ask for or Greg didn't give me. And so instead of saying, you know, you made a point to ask our chairman in front of the crowd a specific point about what he knew or didn't know about the job description. Which again, I was going to say, that's not his job. That's your job. And if he doesn't know it, then that reflects on you why he doesn't know that. Now, having said that, I want to look forward in solutions, not backwards in problems and wouldas, couldas, shouldas. Because I think there's enough of that to go around for this board, for me as a person, for me as a board member, for me as a city council member. I have come in here with a belief in January of 2017 that salaries were out of whack. That was a belief that was formed upon erroneous information. I've been provided enough information from this board, from this general manager, from the TVPPA, from all over that shows we're in line. The reason that I was concerned is because we can be liable as a fiduciary. I like that word. It's an important word. Word. We've performed that duty. Greg has the salary surveys, the salary plan that we've asked for. It's in place. And I just don't think that we need to codify that any further than what we have, because I believe Greg needs flexibility. I do believe that if Greg does do something, I would appreciate if he told us.
Sure.
And that doesn't even have to be in a board meeting. That can just be informal, just in an email. Hey, this one's outside the range. This is why. If you got problems, give me a call. We can bring it up at the board if we need to. But I think a lot of that stuff probably wouldn't even have to get to this level. I deeply desire a conciliatory tenor amongst the board with our general manager. And I want the general manager to start trusting us, just as the general manager wants us to trust him. And if the general manager has questions, please, please, please be proactive and talk to board members. If there's concerns, if there's questions, because there's no dark conspiracies or dark imaginations out there, that there's no plan afoot other than to make this the best place we can make it, make our employees the best employees they can be, and to promote our general manager to be the greatest and best general manager in the valley. And so I don't think that this is necessary. I think that we've done our duty, and that's just my opinion. And I think Steve's points are legitimate, and I think, Mr. Chairman, your points are legitimate. But I deeply desire that let's new business, or call it for a vote.
Or are you gonna withdraw it? Which do you wanna do?
With the understanding, Mr. General Manager, that we can have access to this, that you will keep us informed as to
Absolutely.
what's going on, then that would alleviate the need for having the document there,
I'm just done.
because, so.
That's why I'm not opening.
So are you withdrawing
With
or are we
that-
voting?
No, with that informal agreement, then I would withdraw the need to have this become a permanent document.
Okay, can I
Did we
thank
vote
you.
on your withdrawal?
Thank you.
No, we don't have to vote on the withdrawal.
So if we have a nay, we can't express it?
You can express it.
I don't agree with that, but I'm a minority, I see.
Yes, you know, we're in a minority. We're gonna lose that
Okay,
vote, so.
let me ask this, in front of everybody, public TV, God and country. Are we finished with this discussion, or are we gonna have it?
That's my question. What do we need to do to put this to bed?
because we've been at this point
Really to bed, because what we've
before,
done is we put it to bed for 4 weeks.
and it comes back.
Well, I think this document is a good start to it. If we know what people are being paid, if we know what the general plan is, then we are informed.
There was still a motion about salaries of directors. Are you withdrawing that motion as well?
There isn't no motion
It's
about
all
salaries
withdrawn.
of directors.
Just withdraw.
So there are no motions on the board. And I think as Steve was implying, there aren't many companies around, especially companies of this magnitude, this size, which do not have a salary plan in place. But, you know, if we're comfortable that we can live without it, if we have the communications
But
back and forth.
I think, and I guess I'm arguing that it is in
That's
place.
in place.
And so I don't think that it's not in place. I have never once, as a city councilman, voted on a salary structure for the police, or the fire, or public works. I have never done that. Why? Because it is Roger Hauk's job to do that.
Pick it up.
So I fire or hire Roger Hauk. Roger Hauk sets all that up. And so I know it's there.
Roger Houck has,
Yes, and what I'm saying is that what we have at CUB meets my expectations and my satisfaction. But I've never voted on to have this as a Clinton city councilman. But it is approved through a budget process that I have control over. And then when I'm looking at budget process to determine whether overhead's appropriate, that's when those documents come into play, and that's when Greg would produce them for us.
and you have seen that document.
I've never asked for that document because I've never had
It's never
heartburn
come
about
up
it.
in budgets or anything else?
When we've had a budget workshop, perhaps,
Yeah.
but I mean, hand to God, I've never seen that because I've never asked for it, and I've never thought
Because it
to.
is a budget document. That's what it comes up. Okay, let's move on then to the residential development. I'm sorry to keep you all
I just want to
waiting.
make sure, what do we need to do to put this to bed? Because we've talked about it for months now, and is every month it continues to come back up. I mean, I feel like we've
Back up.
given what the GM has given, what we've asked
It'll only
for.
come up if somebody brings it up.
Are you gonna bring it back up, or are you satisfied in your mind?
As long as I have access to this kind of information, I'm satisfied in my mind. I agree with Steve that, you know, we really don't have, or if we have I don't know if we have a salary plan or not, but,
What happens if we get a new board with new people, maybe a new director, with the same miscommunications and nobody knows this exists or where to find it if it's
Well-
not in personnel policy?
We look at the budget every year, and we're given salaries every year. What is that, in June?
Yes,
you give
ma'am.
them salaries for
Of
what the,
of individuals who
for
are
the-
employed
for
with
the previous
CUB,
year.
correct? So why don't, whenever you give that budget information in June to the board with the individual salaries, just start providing that document that you've already provided to us annually, so that each board member, whether it's us or somebody else, has that piece of, that document and is informed of what the salary schedule that you have in place.
Of course, that's included, what we do, we include that when we do the salaries, but all of that is, whatever you want, we can get you. There's no, and happy to give it to you in the most timely manner that we can. The inference that the chairman's making about the previous year, you have the document that is up to date for that moment in time. Then if we have a 3% COLA, for example, then that becomes effective in July. And then we tell you that there are steps included in that. As you see, we've got steps in timing, what I call time and grade and time and service. And when we do that, all of that is in, and those things occur during the year. If it's if it's every 3 months or every 6 months, those steps are during the year. But we add that percentage, that COLA, and then that becomes in July. So I can't provide that until the board approves that. So I can give you where they are at the time of the budget, And then if you would like, again, a copy after the applied COLA, I mean, all of that can be done whenever you want, or you can pull it at any time during the year. Let's say September, let me see some in September. Those numbers are always available, for you to look at.
To me, this document is a lot more important than seeing what every individual in the company makes.
Because they're two separate things.
Yeah.
What you're looking at is the start, the medium, and the top out.
Yeah.
And then job descriptions, and this is what you do, and
Yeah.
this is what we're looking for, and this is what is expected from you. And I'm saying that Greg Fay, to my knowledge and belief, has those documents, and I believe that he can provide those documents
At any time.
to this board at any time. And therefore, I think it's unnecessary to go through the motions of making anything official, because I think it is already official. We don't need to ratify the Constitution. It's already been ratified. That's my opinion.
I don't know of a utility that has it any different than what we have it here. I mean, although they don't have it to the level that we have on
And I think the
job
expectation
descriptions.
is if he goes outside that, and it could be either direction.
Right.
He may start somebody out below what, that
Well-
range is.
Well, depending on the qualifications, but I'll be happy if anything goes above. Now, those are redone, the top out goes, whatever, if the COLA, whatever that COLA is, that ramps up that top, because that's what that top individual's making. But in those bookends, I'll be happy to at any time provide you timely information about where I am if it's outside of that parameter. So you'll know, there'll be no surprises. Well, I thought that this position maxed out at this, and now he's got $15,000, and I didn't find out until it's a year late. I'll tell you right then, in a timely fashion. So, and then if you need an opportunity for why I want to do that, I ought to be always prepared to tell you, as I am today, why I pay my people what I do and why I think it's appropriate. And then you can value that and grade me on how I'm performing as a manager and meet your expectations with the people that I have and what I pay them.
Okay, I'm happy that the board is of the feeling that we have a salary plan
Yes,
and it's available to us?
yes.
Okay, so,
I have one more thing to say. Greg, one of the things that we've talked about for many months now is lack of communication between the board and the community, the leadership and the board, just in general, communication. One of the things that we've heard from developers is the lack of communication on the website. Obviously, that's an issue that we've made known. I'm not directing that towards you. I'm just saying in general, with CUB and the board, I think there's been a lack of communication. That's the reasoning for my recommendation that you provide what you've already provided to us annually whenever you present the budget information, knowing that those numbers are going to increase with COLA, but it would be the salary scale for the previous year. That way, whether we're on the board or someone else is on the board, when somebody rotates on, that information is provided to that board member, and they have that. So if there's ever a question, I think it would just increase communication. You've already provided to us. We know where to find it if we're here next year or the year after.
So as board members come on, that they have that?
I'm just saying annually, whenever you present the budget information to the board in June with the salary, the individual salaries, that you would present the salary scales that you've provided
Sure.
to us.
and that's,
Just put it with the packet.
yeah.
Sure.
with the city of
That's just a
Clinton,
recommendation on my part.
It is a
I think
budget
it would
document.
increase
with the city of
communication.
Clinton, so that's a
Absolutely.
good idea. Okay, let's move on to the residential development items. You there still, guys? I think we've made a lot of progress. The first 9 motions were passed. Those are in place. They dealt with things such as easements and when PVC could be used and things like that, and those are in place. I think we made a real attempt to match what other utilities were doing, so I think we're in a position now that if somebody comes in talking to the board or about possibility of development here, that they would be able to talk with them and show them that CUB is competitive with other utilities, and then with all of the other things that Clinton brings to the table, I think we will be in a position to, once again, start having some residential development here. So in addition to those, we had 6 policies, 6 motions that Mr. Farr brought. For the most part, those were passed, but with the proviso that Greg would do some wordsmithing and put it in terms that
More definitive terms.
more definitive terms and matched with our existing policies. So I don't know if everyone has copies of those. If not, I can read what Greg wrote. The first policy had to do with the waiving of sewer and water tap fees. What Greg has written, CUB's policy is hereby amended to allow for the waiving of sewer tap fees on residential developments in excess of 20 units, where the development's owner-developer has purchased the material and has installed the wastewater collection system in accordance with CUB's standard specifications for construction of water and sewer utilities within the boundaries of said development, and which has only one point of connection to CUB's existing wastewater collection system, and where no work or financial investment has been required of CUB. So that basically says that we will waive those tap fees for those developments. Greg had a few questions or points, like does this refer to apartments and condominiums as well as individual houses, and I think the answer would be yes. I think early on in this process, Joe had mentioned that without this particular waiver, that the carriage trace complex would not have been built. So this is an important thing. It has already been approved. So I think unless somebody has problems with the way Greg has worded this, we can say this is accepted as presented.
If it's all right, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a few comments if I could.
Sure.
Because it's so much better knowing what you're trying to get to than trying to defend what you're doing. It's a different mindset. So the board has made it clear where they're trying, what we're trying to get to. Because I didn't author this, there are questions that I think are needed to be asked and answered, so we can apply, what it is that the board wants to do. I want to make sure that what gets out of here is actually what you want to do. And for the first thing is, when do you envision the effective date of this policy coming in? Because that makes a difference. So we want to know, when do we start it? And before you answer that, I'll go through all of these others so you'll get an idea where I'm going from. I won't make a hole for you to fall into. Depending on the effective date and whether or not the board is contemplating to then make water tap fees, because this only applies to wastewater, the way it is. So are we looking at how we do, because the same consensus would be if the construction was made for sewer and the construction was already made and water, why would we charge a tap fee for one and not a tap fee for the other? So would the board then consider to expand this to include water taps? And again, if that's the case, then the residential development that has over 20 lots that are started prior to the effective date of this new policy will will their tap fees be waived? Because we've got some, Franklin Woods started in 93, they've got 18 of 33 lots remaining. You know, Patriot Place has 24 of 43 lots remaining. Buckingham subdivision has 18 of 23 remaining. Emery Woods has 6 of 27 remaining, and Apple Tree has 10 of 70 of 47. So what I'm saying is, we would want to know how to handle these customers that have already started but still have lots left to go. In addition, we've got Mr. Duncan, for example, who was in here, who I like a lot. I think we've got good chemistry, but Mr. Duncan had 18 lots, and that's ACWA, so it's not us, but if he were in here speaking for him, and we told him that the cutoff was at 20 lots, and he's got 18, I cannot imagine that he wouldn't think that that's not a good idea. So I think at least we ought to be cognizant of that, realizing that the board is trying to protect the tap fees because they are significant in our revenue. You see, I understand all that, but those, I just want to wave that flag that would be coming. And will any of the ongoing subdivisions that would qualify if they already paid tap fees, and would they get those back? So if they're ongoing and they're still building, and we've got one that's got 24 of 43 lots, the 24 would qualify for the 20 if he would to come in there. Although if I was him, I would say, yes, we qualify, but what about the 21 lots that I've already paid for? Do I get that back? So the application and the ramifications of that motion, I'm going to need board direction on as to how we apply it, who we apply it to, and whether or not it's retroactive for the other, and whether or not water's in there, saying all of that. And again, I'm not asking for until I tell you everything. And then, of course, do apartments come involved to it? So as I indicated in the April email, this at $140,000, over the last 5 or 6 years, is many multiple times more than what our net income is. So the loss of this revenue is significant to the department. I mean, it would put us in a red every year, no doubt, and we're already skating close to that. All that to say is, ongoing, understanding what the board is trying to do, I believe that the most applicable policy would be one that answers a lot of these questions for you. And that is I think all taps that are constructed without a cost to CUB, all taps should be waived the tap fee. That there shouldn't be any fee assessed when all you've got to do is put a meter in. Do you see? There should be an inspection fee to make sure that everything's put in correctly, So I'm saying a comprehensive review of the taps should be, I think, be contemplated by the board. And then when we give the developer or the builder the option, we can put it in and we'll tap you and we'll charge you at cost, whatever our cost is to do that. If you can do it because you've got multiples and less expensive, then you can put it in. We'll inspect it. We'll charge you a nominal fee, as everyone would, to go out there and inspect it. And then there's no charge for either the sewer or the water. But if you're an individual who lives on a country lane and you're now going to tap, and we're on the long side of the street, and it costs $2,200 to actually make the tap, then you'll pay the $2,200, or you'll put that in yourself also if you can do it less expensive. That's what I would offer, realizing I know what you want, and I think that we should get there, but that is a comprehensive way to do it, and that way you exclude the Lynn Duncans at 18, and there is no question about these others, whether they qualify or whether they don't. So that's what I would suggest to the board to contemplate. That would take me some time to get, but I believe that I can recommend to you a policy that hits all these check marks. And then you would say, well, that may sound good, but what is that doing for me now? It keeps me in this ambiguous, what are you going to do? I'm not sure, and I'm trying to make decisions. I would suggest that we say effective at any date from tonight on, that all of the tap fees that we would collect, and we wouldn't be collecting any from you right now anyway, because that comes when it's built, that whatever tap fees from whatever these subdivisions that we may or may not collect, that we let them know that they're retroactively eligible for whatever the new policy comes into play. Do you say? Retroactively eligible, and that way we meet what you want, and that is to give some relief for when they construct all of the construction for both sewer and water, and say, we'll inspect it to make sure it's put in to the right to this and to that, and then you're good to go and there's no tap fee. When I do a policy change, I'll be talking and I'll give you a fair, what I think is an inspection fee for that, and I'm going to talk impact fees, which don't have to be implemented now, but I think that is something over time that this board or another board is going to have to weigh on whether or not it makes good sense. But that's an easy adder, and that's an easy put offer, so to speak. But I'll give you the ramifications and how that affects the revenue, and then by then, if I get direction to do that, I'll give you the solution in a rate structure that will protect our bottom line. So the two choices that I see on this motion is to help me with direction on these questions that we have to implement what is been approved, or give me some latitude to try to put together a comprehensive program for you that encompasses all of this, and still then gives the current developer known relief for what's coming. So that's where I'm at.
I mean, Mr. Chairman, I think part of your job is to keep me from getting over my skis.
Yes, sir.
So I don't face plant and do something that's going to be financially detrimental to the health of the utility. And so I think that the spirit is to encourage development, to be friendly, to be accommodating, particularly when they're doing the work. What I don't want to happen, or nor was my intent, was to initiate a policy only to find out that there's an unintended consequence which results into some sort of fiscal, fiasco to the utility. So as long as that's my intent, and I think that's what the emails that I received seemed to be capturing, and it seemed to be the general manager was capturing, like, hey, I understand where you're going with this. I don't want you to make a mistake.
Yes, that's
and understand the
the
ramifications.
point I'm trying to make.
And I'm okay with that. And I'm just one person, so everybody can have a different opinion.
I like the idea that you've come back with, let's make it retroactive for everybody, but let's think for a little bit to get all the pieces in place right.
You don't want to make enemies. And a 20 cutoff is 19 enemies down the low, because even to one, because it makes the same amount of sense if you provide and construct and install all of this. You should have the same advantage because it's an advantage to
Sure.
us.
And 20 was somewhat arbitrary. It was
Right,
just,
and I thought that it was,
Yeah.
but you can see how that plays into these others. But this, I believe I can eliminate everything. Joe once says you need the same passion about, which is, right. This is part of that passion I think it more than answers the question and hits the bell just right because of what we're trying to do, and then protect everybody, every ratepayer, fair share. You build it, it don't cost you. We're not tapping you. Now, whether or not we need an impact fee, and of course, that's something any developer will go, oh my God. But that's a decision that won't have to be made in July. Do you see? That's something I
Down the
think
road.
that we'll get to. That's right.
If you just took out the in excess of 20 units, would that?
That wouldn't answer these other questions either, on whether or not who's eligible and when they're eligible. And I'm just saying that it doesn't answer what about water?
yeah, you're right.
Mr. Chair, speaking on behalf of the folks that aren't here, Councilman Collins, this is such an innovative approach. And it's no triple package, one where it empowers you for lots that are already developed that can
That's right.
that can be sewered up now and
That's
watered
right.
up now. You'll get immediate impact across the county, across your service area, not just in our area. So then you've got the benefit of both of those things working for you, and that word will spread. And I will say, the word socialism kind of has the same thing as impact, it freezes everybody out.
Right.
So you just gotta be careful with impact fees, but, I mean, the water and sewer fees are so low. Dan and I've talked about it so many times, just like you could raise them 50% per gallon, and my gosh, it would be to balance things out. People would notice it a little bit, not much, you're still well Anderson County's prices. So anyway, I love your idea.
The retroactive concept, are we talking about any subdivision with more than 20?
No, I'm talking about everybody down to one. And that way you're not disqualifying anybody because of quantity. Because I want to apply policy, and it shouldn't be confusing, you see? And that's why Oak Ridge was, God, that was really impressive.
Retroactive to when?
Well, what I'm trying to say is, when we do the policy, we can make that policy retroactive back to now. So if someone was to start today, I don't want them to lose we will collect a tap fee, but we'll refund it, do you see, as it applies to the new policy.
You don't mean
Now,
all these subdivisions started in 1993, we'd go all that far back retroactive?
I would do any new
lot.
any new lot. There would be no refunds because it would only apply to a new build within an existing development, but whether he's got, Emery Woods has got 6 lots left. So if they build on those 6 lots, then they would fall under this policy. So it applies to everybody equally, irrespective of number, because it makes equal sense. Then all we've got to do is make sure that where the downside will be, where someone was getting a tap for $450 when it was costing us $2,200 to make the tap, the downside is they're either going to have to pay that, our cost, or they're going to have to put it in themselves. So on one end, that we require a developer to essentially lay it out there for us, and this builder that is costing us $2,200, somebody is help offsetting that, do you see? And this would take all of that away. everybody pay whatever it is, because the developer is paying the cost of the construction, and we then ask an individual builder to pay the cost of construction.
If I go back to the genesis of this whole process here several months ago, to promote development, residential development in the county, and make the county a more accepting place for developers to come to do their business. With that in mind, that the 20 gives me an issue, because somebody like Lynn Duncan, I think it may not be the level Joe is, but I think Lynn is the kind of folk that brings that kind of thing to the county. He brings the goodwill to the county when he's successful. So to cut him out at
Would have a
18
very difficult time sitting on the other side of the table from him, saying, I'm sorry, Mr. Duncan, is there any way you can squeeze 2 more houses in? And I would just,
But your solution.
would take care of all of that. Right. So if the board thinks that that is a good idea, we don't have to answer these other questions, and we protect going forward, and I'll work on this comprehensive policy that will encompass not only sewer, but water, and how it impacts us financially, and what solutions are going to be in play to protect that.
And you're covering apartments and condos, all the way from single dwellings up to condos and apartments?
Everything. And that's the beauty of it, so, and it's very, I envision this to be very simple to apply the policy to, and it won't be hard. You build it, you don't pay. We build it, you pay. That's pretty much it.
I would think that every developer or builder would think that's a great
Yeah,
thing, and
I think
all the board members would think that's a great thing. That's a win-win, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
I think the 20 units was just you pulled a number.
Well, you're trying, because again,
starting point.
you're trying to send the message. I'm happy to take that spirit of what the board wants and provide you with a comprehensive program that we can implement, that I don't think is going to come back and bite you.
That's right. Good.
I make a motion that we accept Greg's proposal.
All those
Yeah,
in favor,
yeah.
say aye.
Aye.
Okay. The next policy issue, and I don't have to read these because I.
Mr. Chairman, if you like, I've got these on a roll, and I can go through some of the comments that I would have,
Okay,
if that would be easier for you.
you're going to go 1, 2, 3?
I am every one.
Okay.
And again, this presentation is less than 2 hours for the last, so if you see, I had, and I'll point the word out to you, I had a mythology instead of methodology, so Dudley found it, so please don't laugh at me. Dud, am I gonna try to do this? I got the thing right there, I'm ready to go. We know what the original motion was, and then we wanna make sure that meets the test. So essentially is the to promote competitive pricing, CUB standard specifications of water and sewer shall allow for the consideration of more than one brand of pump to be installed in a CUB-owned and maintained low-pressure service area. In other words, we're making a distinction. If we don't own it and maintain it, you put in any pump that you want. Prefabricated sewer grinder pump stations and equipment include both centrifugal and progressive cavity pumps with a verified track record of proven dependability that meet the electrical, mechanical, and warranty specifications established by CUB. All of those will be considered, and then I've put verbiage in that is inclusive in our standards and specifications. So you'll see that we've got the environmental one, we've got Zoller, and we've got Liberty pump in there, and then we've got models and what they do. But any pump outside of this, we'll be glad to look at and evaluate, and if it meets our standards, we'll be glad within that group to take.
Keep that list updated and online and.
Sure.
and all that, yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I might ask, there will be people that will develop, hopefully, apartment groups, condo groups, but residential groups that don't want to put a particular pump in there that you've got, and would like for the homeowners association to, as a group, buy the pumps, maintain the pumps. And so, to do that, will greatly lower the cost of the lot, because a lot of times, instead of $3,000 pump for one lot, you put $3,000 pump for 4 lots. Okay? But it's not CUD's cost, but once it gets out into the right of way, it becomes CUD's property. Will you allow for homeowners associations to support those pumps?
Yes, essentially, what we will bill on is what comes through the water meters. Now, if the whole association took the sewer and and in your case, brought it to Miller Road, for example, and that ran through ACWA, and then they would be our customer, we would put that on a master meter, check it with the water meters to make sure that everything was working right, and we would just bill them. We've got sewer that is pumped up, however it gets to our gravity. If they want to do a low-pressure pump, or if, I've got a low-pressure pump because I've got a basement, so it pumps up into my gravity, and that gravity's into the main out in front of my house. I don't care what you have, as long as we don't have to own it and maintain it. I don't care how it gets to us, as long as it gets to us, as long as it's gravity that gets to us, and that's essentially what it would be.
And that would be applicable to one home, your home, okay? And so, but in smaller subdivisions, a lot of times in hilly areas, we have to group these pumps, and one pump can do 4, 5, 6 homes, and it can easily flow into it, and you can design the lots to do that. So the homeowners association can buy one pump, lowering the price of all the lots. So I'm just wanting to make sure this allows for that.
It allows for that, and we would try to work with them. There are, I see problems with that, flags that would go to me because individual A has a child and they flush diapers down there. So now you've got a grinder pump in diapers and everything else, and the retired couple B now has got to deal with the pump being out. I see the applicable, in the application of it, I see a problem. In the principle of it, for us, we don't care how it gets to us, as long as it gets to us, and we'll bill you. But in the real world application, I wouldn't want to be on another pump with somebody that I had no control over, especially because we have seen some tremendously cool stuff come through that pump. We've got the jail, they would put whole uniforms down. We had one guy that put a boot down, I mean, how do you get a boot down there? But so I just say in the real world application, I see a potential problem with that. But in the theory of what do we accept, if it gets to us in gravity, I don't care how it gets there.
But that would be an HOA problem, and the HOA would probably have a full-time staff.
They subcontract the same guys that
Yeah.
there's county uses, so, but it's really, in a subdivision, this is gonna happen a lot more and more. So like in apartments, if you're in 12, you'll have one pump, okay, and the guy in his apartment's gonna keep that pump up. Because you don't have 12, but it's the same in these small subdivisions. It's a homeowners association that have to take it, because not, they don't look after all these things. And so, and it lowers your cost. So as long as that.
To be honest with you, we wish that we didn't have a grinder pump on our whole system. I mean, if you could take over all of the grinder pumps in the system, we could work a deal. Yeah, well, yeah. We could work a deal if you took the whole sewer system, I believe.
Greg,
Sir?
I have seen subdivisions mature, and the builder say, I'm out of here, you all form your own homeowners association and it's yours. And about half the people there say, I'm not gonna put any money into that, and, you know, half the subdivision supports all the things that have to be done. Would we have any legal
Lawsuits all over.
abilities if we said, we're not doing it?
Of course, we can be sued for anything, but that's part of the application process. Dudley was treasurer at his homeowners association in his subdivision. Not to name names, but he wouldn't mind to put return checks up there either, I'm sure. But the deal with that is, and you're very right, is if someone doesn't pay, and that happens to be the one throwing the diapers down, there'll be lawsuits. In the application of this, I would never recommend that as a way, but it meets the need in the front end, because in theory, everybody does what they're supposed to do. In theory, you don't have a problem. In real life, generally that doesn't happen, but you're dealing with a different level. I mean, they aren't $20,000 homes we're putting up here, but it would just like be a break on their service line. We would hate it for them, but they're gonna have to figure it out. The biggest problem we've got is in the subdivision where they're both using the same lateral. So you Y into one lateral and then you go out to the main. So this guy's got this, and this guy's got this, and they both get into that. So when that gets stopped up, who pays the plumber to get that done? Well, they're all fighting that. I mean, who it is. So the real application of that is not good. If it's not ours, we don't have a dog in that fight. We do, however you want to get the sewer to us. If it's on gravity, we're going to take it, so we'll be good to go.
We legally could tell them to call us when you get it fixed, we're out of here.
Well, yes, we would do that, but that wouldn't, I don't want to be a damper on what is being proposed, because in theory, you cannot deny that is it's a lower cost option, and in theory, everybody does what they're supposed to do. That shouldn't be, in the long run, it wouldn't be a problem. But in the real life application, I think it's going, and that's what I said, But, that's as it is. Are you ready for me to move on? We liking that?
Yeah.
Okay. Motion 3, this deals with electric underground. As I stated in my email, I think that this captures the spirit of the motion of what was trying to be said, and there was an ambiguity in the original motion about bidding out the entire project, and then it went back to stay that we were pulling the conduit, the cable. So this clears that up. And I think it still meets what you're trying to do. Developer has the option to provide and install the primary conduits using the approved licensed contractor, electric contractor, according to our specifications and approved by CUB, and the primary conductor will be pulled by CUB. I didn't address the price matching because the developer can bid that out and then match that to our stated cost, and then say, well, it makes more sense for you to do it, it's cheaper for you to do it, or we can do it at a less of a cost, and then they make that call. We won't be matching low bid, we will just say, this is what our cost is, and you can use that against anybody else. We just as soon have somebody else do it, but we'll tell you what our costs are to do it. If you can beat that, then get it done. But at the end of the day, we're pulling the primary conductor. So in terms of the issues of the transformers, I've addressed that in the rebate program. So I think this meets what you want. It satisfies what.
I realize there's gonna be some give and take, and so it's fine with me.
understood on your itemization sheet. And so you did a great job on breaking down the stuff for us, so we could use that as a case study. And so when we're bidding against other bidders,
Right.
we just need to know that.
What you'll need is a final plat, Joe, and then we can give you a final number. And that way, you'll have that strong, this is what it's gonna be, and then you can bid that out. And I had one guy that had an in with the manufacturer of conduit. And he could get that at a deal like nobody's business. So it would make good sense for him to do that. So, yes, to answer your question.
There's good itemization on your all's estimate, because if things they slide around, then obviously your bidders will be confused.
Of course, what we'll give you is the cost for us to do it or not to do it. We'll give you, this is what we'll cost, this is what we'll charge to do it.
But not all in will be itemized, is that correct?
Well, we'll have material and labor, down there. What else would you be looking for?
I think what he's trying to ask is, you're not giving us the option to pull the wire, understood? So
Right.
it's one wire. We need the cost for broken out, separate. This is what the wire and the wire is gonna be. This is our cost for material, for conduit.
Well, see, POST goes into that, so what we give you is a payroll, overhead, stores, and transportation. That's part of our overhead. So we're not gonna let you cherry pick what, well, we can get the conduit, but we don't wanna dig. We'll give you the cost of what this project, what our charges are.
You're going to break out the cost for the portion we're allowed to do separate, so that we can see those two cost sides.
Gosh, yeah, I mean, yeah, well, yeah, how can you bid out, this cost, we're gonna charge you $1,000 for this, not we're gonna charge you $15,000 for this, and hidden in that is about $1,000. This is what it costs for us to lay underground, and this is our charge for that.
We're good?
Yeah, and I think one thing, maybe what you're asking for as well, if I can interject, is you just want detailed drawings. I need X number of conduits to such and such size between here and here and a certain number of vaults. Is that
Yes.
engineered drawings to bid by?
Of course,
That's what they need to give us the final plat for us to give them that information.
yeah. Good, so we're good?
Good with that?
Cooking now.
Aren't we? All right. This is the additional stuff that we're gonna include it in our development procedures, so it's more in detail what that means. In coordination with the developer, we're gonna install the primary conduit and unless they get a bidder and bid that out as different. But this says open and close the trenches, the excavation work. It's more detail of what the motion says as to what does it mean for you to install the system yourself. I'll give you a second to look that over, but there's nothing scary in that.
It's just a lot of detail.
Yeah. I'm satisfied in the
Yeah.
corner.
We good?
Good.
This question, we'll talk more about that. Yeah, I don't think they're there, I don't think that. And then we've listed the approved license, what we've already approved. These are already, any of these that you use, we're good to go. If you've got somebody else, we'll be glad to look at that. Okay, 4, we're ready, we're moving on, right?
Yes, sir.
Electrical line extensions. This is the work in progress. And I've got some options for you here, because what we're trying to get to is well, I've got the issue. With the absence of capacity or impact fees, in other words, do we get the money from somewhere else? How to serve and incentivize residential development while protecting the ratepayer, that gets into that justify is what Oak Ridge does, without relying on the developer to fully fund off-site infrastructure extensions or improvements. How do we integrate the allowances that we make for individual residential customers, which is currently at 25, which I'm going to be recommending we lower over time, with the individual developer, the residential developer. So how do we integrate that, and how do we incentivize development by taking some of the burden of extensions off of the developer? That's what I understood the nut that we're trying to crack. Is that pretty much right? And I've got some suggestions on how to do that. I'm going to make this, this is simplistic, and we can make it more complicated, but I'm using round numbers to make everything a lot easier. This is my first draft. I got that clip art off the internet. This is an example of a way that I think that we can apply this that is easy to understand and meets the criteria of what we're trying to get to. This is a little bit out of sequence because what's coming up next is rebates, and this ties in with the rebates. So under this example, if the overhead cost is $100,000 and you've got 100 lots, you get a rebate of $1,000 per lot. That's kind of easy. You divide, right? 100 into the 100,000. So I've got 3 plans, and this is what I need your direction on. I've done a little bit more work on Plan A. Dealing with 100 lots, $100,000 for overhead cost, rebate is $1,000 a lot. The methodology, and this is where I had mythology, the methodology to determine the amount of justified off-site improvements. How do we do that? Where we protect the ratepayer. And I'm telling you, the Oak Ridge model wasn't helping us. It was more expensive. We applied it to the rebate program, and KUB's was ours is the most generous, and we designed it that way, to be that way, because I think that's what my direction was from the board. So if we used a percentage of the total on-site overhead cost as justification, and I say overhead because that's what our system, our standard system is for the calculation of off-site improvements. So if we pulled a percentage, and that is an arbitrary percentage, but we'll say 25%, and we're at the end of all of this, I'm going to ask the board's direction to flesh out one of these plans. So in Plan A, I'm saying to get an arbitrary percentage of what the overhead system costs. And in this, we say, was $100,000. So we can say at 25% of the total overhead system cost, we're rocking a $25,000 is what we could put towards an extension. So if we apply that $25,000 to the rebate program that I'm going to be recommending coming up next, that would raise from what the developer would get from $1,000 a lot to $1,250 a lot. So that's the total on-site overhead cost plus the 25% of on-site improvements divided by the number of lots. You get to $1,250 a lot. Now we know if we get to 50%, which is what I'm going to be recommending, that if the developer gets to a 50% completion rate lots, then they get the total, whatever's left in that deposit back. So essentially, under this example, with $125,000 at 50 lots, then the developer would get that total amount back, which includes the line extension. So they would get the total amount back for the lot of overhead cost, and they would get the total amount back up to the 25%, which is the $25,000. So they get $1,250 a lot back times the 50 gives them their whole investment back. Now, does that make sense to anybody? If 25% of the total overhead cost towards an extension, and that 25% goes into the rebate program, and you get 100% of the overhead cost and the 25% of the extension cost back in the rebate program. So much a lot over so much time. If you fill up within 50%, within 7 years, you get the total amount back. So that gives you, it meets the test of what are we doing to defray some of the potential costs for an extension, and how can that developer get back? He can get back what he said he was going to do, and that's give us the subdivision to pay for it. And that's only at 50% fill. So, that's plan A.
Does that make sense to you? I mean, that kind of made sense to me. 50%, if you fill it up 50% in 7 years, then you get to, in a 7-year period.
So we have, the developer has a lot at risk to be able to sell out. And that's good for the community, it's good for CIP, it's good for the developer.
Well, we've got, as we showed before, we've got some developments been here since 98, so, but whatever is done, because the first year, unless you're really, really good, you're not gonna build many houses. So really, it's not till year 2 or 3 that you're gonna start seeing a return. But you should be able to see a 50% within 4 or 5. And see, Oak Ridge only gives you 3 years, which would be unbelievable to try to get a 50% in 3 years for most developers. KUB gives you 5. And again, that puts 7 is a sweet spot for me, because that's realistic. If you're building and selling, you ought to be able to do 50% within 7 years. And then that gives you your overhead cost back, and it gives you 25% of that overhead cost that was applied to an extension, if you need it, back. So that's plan A. If we like that, I can flesh that out. Plan B.
I guess behind the curtain on this still is, if they prefer underground, they pay all the cost above the overhead costs.
That's correct.
Within the facility.
Well, yeah, and we'll see that in the rebate program, but yes, that's exactly right. Plan B just provides for a fixed cost per lot. Come up with an arbitrary number and say, we're going to give you X amount per lot. And I have a lot on that, which is why you just got question marks there. Because I'm thinking Plan A is the way to go. Because Plan C is developer pays the entire amount of the off-site improvements. We don't do anything. That's the way it is now. Yeah, I'm thinking Plan A, which is where I spent most of my time, because,
And that's digestible for you.
oh
You
yes,
feel you like it, and it seems like a sweet spot for everybody.
oh
It
yes,
does me.
it does me too.
I understood it, I think.
Yeah.
Is that how you price the case study?
Well, see, in that, you're coming off, and there is no off-site. So yes, your case study is as is within the, and we're gonna get right to that right now, okay? Which is the rebates, program and the rebates.
2 to go.
And 6 is already done, so that's.
All right, 1 to go.
Right here.
We don't need to, this is the proposed matches LCUB's rebate policy. That's what I'm proposing, to match that and to make it clearer for our folks to understand, which I hope that I've done, which we ought to be able to convey. And then once we get, I'm going to give them a copy of this PowerPoint so they can understand their own program. So CUB collects the total cost difference between underground primary, the underground primary electric system, and the overhead, if it's applicable, because we won't have to collect the difference if you're doing overhead. So no portion of this amount is refundable to the developer. That is, we would buck up against TVA, because TVA requires us to get the cost difference between any enhancement to an overhead system and going underground. So they require us to do that. So this meets that requirement that a developer, should they choose to do an underground system, that we recover that cost in full. CUB also collects upfront a deposit, and the deposit which is equal to the total cost of the overhead primary electric system. So one is a non-refundable, here's what you got to pay because you're doing underground, and the other falls into this deposit, which is this bank that we're going to take back out of. Do you see? That matches LCUB's policy. Transformers are included in the cost calculation. So the amount of the deposit, and I've got an example of this, the amount of the deposit is refundable to the developer on a per-lot basis once permanent service is established to an occupied dwelling. The refund amount per lot is equal to the deposit divided by the number of lots. This amount is paid annually in December based on new occupied dwellings with permanent service connected during that year. We do it once a year. Once the development reaches 50% of the total lots with permanent service and occupied dwellings, any remaining portion of the deposit that's not already been rebated back goes back to the developer. No part of the deposit is eligible for refund after 7 years. Joe once said, put the risk on the developer and we'll take care of it. And at no time can the refund amount be greater than the deposit. Like, my gosh, here's what I've got. I've now found 3 more lots. Okay, simplified example. 6 houses in a development, overhead cost 6, underground cost 9. If they're going to go underground, CUB collects the difference between the underground and the overhead primary electric system. No portion of this is refundable to the developer. So underground costs 9, overhead costs 6. There's a $3,000 difference. That goes right to CUB, no refund. Now, what's in play is the $6,000. CUB, we call that a deposit, which is equal to the total cost of the overhead primary electric system, including the cost of the transformers. Total overhead cost in this example is $6,000. The developer pays that up front as a deposit. The refund amount per lot is equal to the deposit divided by the number of lots. This amount is paid annually in December. So the amount of the deposit, which is $6,000, divided by the number of lots, which is 6, is $1,000 a lot that he gets refunded back for every house that's permanent service. So how this chart then goes, on year 1, he's not able to build a house and get a meter on that, have somebody live in it, so he still has a $6,000 balance here. In year 2, finally sells 1 house, he gets a rebate of $1,000, which brings him down to $5,000. In year 3, he sells a house, now he's got $4,000. In year 4, he has now sold 3 houses, which is 50% of the lots in that subdivision. He now has hit the 50% mark, so he doesn't get $1,000, he gets the whole balance back, all $4,000, and now we're good to go. If he didn't hit, even though he sells 2 lots and houses after that in year 5, we've already given him back the total cost of the overhead system. Now, where this plays into the extension cost that we just talked about is that extension cost would be included in this rebate program. The 25% that he's eligible for, which we would collect in a deposit, would go into this bank, and it would just add the same proportion amount per house that he would get. And then as soon as he hit the 50% mark, whatever that balance remaining was, the developer would get all of that. So that's the sweetness, I think, about the extension cost. So questions on that?
None.
Now, I've got an example.
I just want to make a comment about that. It's innovative, it's simple,
I hope so.
It's gonna happen. It's gonna happen.
So we've done based on your preliminary plat, I've tried to get the numbers because we're not dealing with $6,000 and $9,000 here, do you see? So, under this preliminary plat, and that may move, Joe, and we've got no problem with the movement, everything will move according, I don't know. So, but under this, with the preliminary numbers that we've originally talked about, we've got 159 lots. We've given you a cost for underground service based on the information we have. That'll move when we get the final done. But under this scenario, what we know now, 246, overhead is 164. So the 164 becomes your deposit amount. If there was a line extension, then that would get also bumped into this.
When you say line extension,
What does it cost for us to serve you from a different location, not from the 4-lane, because there's no extension necessary there. But if you want it to come in another way, there would be a cost to us to do that, and then we would value that if the board agrees to this 25%, whatever the cost of this overhead system is at 25%, we would give you that much of an allowance for an extension that you would put into this deposit amount. Do you see? But that's, let's just stick with this right now. 246, 164 paid up front, which would leave a difference of 81,000. Do you see? And that is the difference between the overhead and the underground. So the rebate amount is the number of lots divided by the deposit amount. And this calculates to $1,036 a lot. The final cost to you, assuming at build out, is the 81,000, which is the difference between overhead and underground. But you would get the 164,700 back 100% if you build out at 50% within 7 years. And this assumes that you're providing and installing the conduit, but that can change if we give you a price that you think is lower than what you can get it done for. It will up the cost for you by whatever that amount is.
So when you talk about extension cost, and that extension cost for that definition, we've got a little section on the streets we want to go underground. That's all we're in that. We just want to know how that would be. Doesn't look like it'd be.
We pay for the difference to take that underground for you guys, just that portion.
Well, we're dealing anything with underground puts us in a little bit different, but the cost of overhead, if the extension is overhead, it is the overhead cost to get to you. That's what would qualify. So the difference between underground and overhead for that extension you would pay, but the overhead cost, whatever that is, 25% of that you will be eligible to get back. Does that make sense?
Understood how that equation would be, because what we have is existing, 400 feet overhead along Signal Springs. We'd like to take that, this code, or because all of our stuff will be underground. We just don't know.
Well, wouldn't that just increase your underground cost, Joe? Because, yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
We're asking, like, would you be okay if we were willing to pay that to you guys to take that portion?
Rebate like this.
No, that wouldn't be rebate, because that would be underground.
Yeah, Joe knew, your daddy knew that, Dickie, just to let you know. That wasn't a surprise to him.
As long as it's a reasonable amount.
Yeah, well, and we would always give you that and tell you what that is. But underground costs, you have to pay for. But if it would have been an overhead line to do that, then we would include that in the calculation, and then that's what you would get. Do you see? But if it's strictly an underground feed where there's already overhead or whatever, then that would all be on you. But I mean, I would look at that to make sure that there's no wiggle room there. But in principle, overhead is always going to be your responsibility. If we can say there is a difference, we were going to go overhead here, and now we're going to go underground, you'd only have to pay the difference. If we were never going to go underground, but you want to go underground, then it's you. So, with this rebate program, as is, as stated, if we agree to that, then we can implement that right away. And then tie in the extension policy. If I flesh that out, I'll have that, and it won't bother you. Everything will be, I'll recommend that everything be retroactive to whatever's going on right now. And I'll have that as soon as I can.
I think it's great.
One question. On that last one in the bottom right-hand corner, there was a star that said developer pays for all conduit. Are you saying that is included in the non-refundable amount? Or is that going to be?
All of these numbers are the same numbers that we talked about because you said that you were going to provide, because this is specific to your project, that you were going to provide all conduits, vaults, pedestals, and all the trenching. That's what you said. Now, we can give you a number on what we would charge you for that. But that's what you told us you wanted to do, so we didn't include that in our cost.
I think there's some miscommunication here. That's not what we said. We wanted an estimate from you all that was comparable to what we had received on a similar project from SCD. So that number right there does not include the difference in the overhead and the underground. That number right there does not include the cost of actually what's in that $81,000.
Conduit's not included in that, no. Because that was what we understood that you were wanting to do.
No, we said we wanted the option to price it out ourselves. That's what we requested. We wanted to have that number broke out so we could price it out separately. So this particular scenario, what's in the difference of the $81,000 if conduit and vaults and pedestals and all that other stuff is not included in this?
I didn't work that up. Todd, do you have off the top of your head?
Off the top of my head, that number is about $67,000 for our cost to install all the conduit, provide and install all the conduit, vaults, pedestals, and all that.
And that number's not in that up there.
No.
So that additional 67,000 goes on top of the 81?
Top of the,
Yes,
because it would be part of the underground.
correct.
So what's in the $81,000?
Transformers, cable, our labor to make it all up, install it.
Maybe you can help us understand, Todd. If we were going to add that, have you do that $67,000, what number would that be added to here?
The 81,000. We starts at adding to the 246, so then it results in on top of the 81 also.
Okay, so our initial cost that we were given, first time we looked at this was give or take $220,000. We now went from 220 to 246, and the 246 has now went to over 300.
You know, and we'll be glad to go back to the emails. This is the cost of the project. This, and we understood that you were very much interested in having.
Ourselves, that's the reason for the whole other motion we discussed this.
So I can't tell you other than this is what the underground system cost, and this is what the overhead system cost.
This is what the underground system costs without conduits, vaults, pedestals, or any installation or trenching.
That's correct. That's correct. I mean, we'll go back and verify, because now we're going from memory, and I'm telling you, there's a lot of ships that pulled out of the harbor since now and then. But whatever, in theory, whatever the underground system cost and whatever the overhead system cost, the difference is what we're going to look to you. And whether or not you can lower that difference by doing these other projects of providing and installing all the conduit, and that makes good sense to you, you'll know.
What is included in that 246? What's the underground cost?
Charles, I don't have that file because it's that thick, and that has moved a lot of times.
I just meant in general. I mean, what kinds of things? It's not conduits or vaults or pedestals.
It's conductor, it's transformers at probably about $3,000, a shot in that. We've got 159 lots, so that is our tabulated cost.
The conduit would be a big part of that. I mean,
Transformers and conductor.
But, you know, for brevity, what we're talking about is implementing a policy.
Right,
This is the policy.
right.
You gentlemen are disputing accuracy of numbers that interpret a policy. That can be done, and we're speculating somewhat on the numbers. Okay, fine. You know, maybe they'll change, and then you've said they'll change, and they're not set in stone. And I would think that any developer would know what these are and see what they are and itemized detail. So, I mean, I don't think we're going to get to some, and I don't think we should be expected to get to some, number that everybody agrees on. This is an example. That's the way I'm interpreting it. Is that fair to say?
Yes, sir, I showed you the policy,
Yeah.
and then at their request, and I think it's a fair request, they want to see how that ties in
How's
to
that
their,
look?
to
Yeah.
their numbers that we have so far, and I'm much better with the files in front of me than to
And
try
I
to
think
pull
that's,
out
I think that's a
the,
fair statement.
the detail, but whatever the underground cost is, and whatever the overhead cost is, it's the difference that we'll look to you to pay.
Okay, and the transformers have now been added back to this.
Transformers were always a part. That's what I'm going to say. That in order to get to the rebate policy, in order for us to mirror the rebate policy, transformers are a part. That's always what's made the distinction between a non-rebate program and a rebate program. So you can't have one without the other, because your rebate comes when there's somebody living there, you see, which is different than we're only going to put them out as someone lives there. You see, someone has to be living there to do it. So that's part of the rebate program.
So, I think I've got this right. We're gonna add 67,000 to the 81,000.
Don't know that, Joe.
Well,
Let you know,
we don't know any of this.
right,
We're
right.
assuming a lot of things here, but
right.
we got emails before that mentions the line and stuff. So we added 67 to the 81, and so we're looking at like 150,000, 5,000. So that would mean that each of our 159 lots would cost about $950 each. Hard cost after we get our rebate. Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that what you're going to get back is the cost of the overhead, which is $164,700. That is what we have calculated according to the preliminary plat. That's what I'm sure that you would get back in the rebate program, assuming you filled out at 50%. Whatever the underground cost is, the difference between that 164 and whatever that top number is, that's what you're going to have to pay.
We didn't understand it that way, but
All right.
Are there differences in transformers for overhead lines versus underground?
Yes, sir. Are we good on the policy? Are we ready to move on?
Yes, sir.
We've discussed this, and I think that we're in good shape on this. I had a pretty detailed explanation for you, and I need to tell you, and I think it's worthwhile, and I have to say that the statement, in order to stop frivolous spending, has caused great angst within our company. That it was inferred that in the original motion that we wanted to get to state minimums in order to stop frivolous spending, which to me says frivolous is not having any value or not being serious. I just want you to know that that has caused great angst, and I'm glad that that has no part in what we have agreed as the motion going forward, and how state policies and minimums are not part of what we do, and that we will continue to design our electric system by our professional engineers that are first sensitive to safety and to the health of the system and to protect the public on what we do. So I appreciate that the board has given us the latitude to continue to design that way, and not putting that stipulation that we relegate to minimum requirements, and that any time that anybody, developer or otherwise, thinks that we're not applying that policy appropriately, would always have an option to come to the board, but not every time that we exceed what we are the state minimums, or we will be in here with every job, because we always exceed the minimums of what we do.
This option of a developer coming to the board to appeal a decision for this motion, and maybe any others, is there a way we can put in a policy somewhere that before somebody comes to the board to appeal, they have to have sat down with you?
Yes, sir.
And discussed that, and you were...
That was my understanding that we were going to do. That. The fact is that I believe the public, anyone, should have and feel comfortable and be encouraged to appeal to the board when a policy they don't feel is appropriate or being applied correctly, or if they were discriminated against or disadvantaged in a way that they're not satisfied with how they're being treated. I always think that, as the resolution says, that I am the interface between the developers, between the public, between the employees, anybody that comes to this board or has the ear of the board, unless they do it in public session, and if they do and it's on an issue, I think the board ought to refer them back to me if they haven't had an opportunity to discuss that with me. And then when they do come, I will have the board and be prepared to respond in a way, and I'm not blindsided. So for minimums, for example, we don't design minimums, and we won't do that. But if anyone felt like that was being detrimental in such a way, or that we were outside of what any reasonable person would be doing, then after they discuss that with me and saying, here's my beef and what can you do, and I'll always do all that I can, but then I will be fully prepared, and I'll be telling them, this is the reasons why, and this is what I'll be telling the board, because the board doesn't want to say, well, here's the SAG requirement on this, or the clearance for how close can you get to the wire. The board doesn't, and I would be on this desk saying, don't do that, because you don't want to jump over the PEs in the design saying, I'm going to lower that standard, because it still meets the minimum requirements.
I think for me, the spirit of the motion was regulations, in my opinion, undoubtedly can be over burdensome, safety standards, we can wrap ourselves up in bubble wrap to be safe, you know. So where reasonable minds can disagree at some point too. Now, what I don't want to sacrifice is what you're talking about, the spirit of being safe. We don't want the bare minimum. I used an example about lawyers, and just because you pass the bar doesn't mean you're a great lawyer, so on and so forth. And so I think as long as we are working with people and being reasonable, and if somebody feels that we're not being reasonable, they have an opportunity to first approach you, and then if that doesn't get resolved, feel comfortable enough to come to the board and present a case. And that we would, again, defer greatly to your, you know, recommendations. But if we find that, hey, there's really no good reason, I don't know why, this is an example, that they have that opportunity to be heard, and the board has an opportunity to implement something.
I think that is
That's the spirit.
that is exactly right. The phrase frivolous and cost savings and things like that, I don't believe that it was the intent
Right.
to imply that's the way we conducted business.
Because safety is
Right.
safety to our ratepayers, to the public, I mean, that's just not something that's negotiable.
Right, well, that's what we think too. So I believe that the motion as it stands, as it was originally approved, I think works great with us.
I think just the term minimum requirements could be a little bit misleading, because usually if you're meeting a national electrical safety code, that's good enough. I mean, that's,
Even in the code, Charles, they say that these are a de facto minimum. In other words, they are telling you this is the absolute minimum. So because it makes a difference on where you live. If you're living in the Northeast, in Maine, the sag is different, for example, because the conductor is the heat, and the hotter it gets, the more it sags. So if you're living in Arizona, you've got to design different. So they leave it to the professionals. They train for that, and they leave it to the professionals, depending on what is there. They're going to design it to provide the protections for the public and for our employees and for everybody else, and provide a reliable system. You can get lights from this side of the room to that side of the room with an extension cord, do you see? But that's really not the desired way, although at the end the lights get lit, but that's not the desired way to do it, you know?
usually don't all other federal, state, and local codes, don't they give you and I'm just asking.
Just know that what they do is they give you the minimum, because we've got to comply. If the city has a different level of test, many cities have different level of test. Live in California and they'll laugh at you on the national code. California doesn't follow that. They've got their own code. Do you see? And that's metrics higher than what because you got the National Electric Code, you got the National Electric Safety Code, and those are two different, one's IEEE and one's done by the fire department.
I think, as it was originally stated, probably, well, no, in my mind, it opens us up to liability.
Yes, sir.
I think this
Covers us. That's
to the
correct.
point where it's crafted better. And I think
You're saying us no less than these codes. Don't ever design anything that is less than the National Electric Code and National Electric Safety Code.
Yeah, it goes back to safety.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to make sure that we're on the same page here. Every one of these national codes, every one of these state codes, you lives with them all day long. They all have safety factors. Tons of safety factors. In fact, I would argue that they're like this on safety factors. And so I'm fine with everything going through there. But when you get right to that last line, or more, unless more restrictive requirements are justified by CUB, there's not a single thing you can't justify. I mean, you listen to the national arguments, you listen to the local arguments about electric, plumbing, whatever, there's not a single thing you can't justify. Somebody can justify it.
Is that a common thing? Does that,
So that's where we're running into, because I don't want to challenge his authority. Goodness, he runs a great board, runs a great utility. But there's a feeling out in the community, far and wide, that it's done CUB's way, and you're not gonna get power unless you get it the CUB's way. What's that got to do with the national or state electrical government? Very little. So, I just understand what that means is, it gets to be, it's justified by who, by what's the metrics, by somebody doesn't want to be inconvenienced because they might have to go check a meter, you know, so it can get to be very cumbersome and very costly. And I'm not pleading for us, this won't even affect us on this, but as far as condos and apartments, those last few words are killers. In some industrial, it's not that.
I wouldn't back up an inch on what we do and how we do it, not an inch. Hey, he's right. He's right. It's got to be our way, because we're not going to have it any other way, you know. But our way is the safe way. It's designed by professional engineers, and it meets the standards that are supposed to be there, you know. And we're not going to do an extension cord from one end of the room to the other.
I guess as long as there's an appeals process. I mean, like if you have a real difference.
Are you gonna tell everyone when you come in, if there's a disagreement, will it be publicly known at that moment in time there is an appeals process that you're going through?
You know, I can tell you this, JD, I will be shocked in an appeals process if any sensible board would overrun what the professional engineers are recommending for safety. So the appeals process is to me. And then if I'm not being reasonable, or if you think that I'm not applying the policy correctly, then there's always an appeal, but that's for anything. But I'm not gonna, if a developer came in, I'm not gonna say, oh, by the way, if you don't agree with anything I say, you can go to the board, because then they don't need me. And I'm not gonna put them in the position of liability. Can you imagine what if they voted to lower the requirements to a developer because it meets the minimum requirements, and then there was an issue with that after the PEs designed it differently to open them up to light? I would not do that. I would be recommending hardly, please don't do that, because they're not PEs. They need to trust us that we're doing the right thing and that we're designing correctly.
Yeah, I would think if it got to that dispute level, you would want a qualified independent person to hear their. I don't think you'd say we're always going to trust or take the word of the CUB PE. I don't think you'd say you're always going to take the word.
We've got 7 here, and it would go through a process.
Well, and I think too, you'd want to protect yourself in the event that you want to be. There may be very good reasons you have to step outside these codes. And I would want the ability to be able to do that. Now, and having said that, I get what you're saying. You're saying that this gives CUB at the end of the day sort of carte blanche, even though we have this, and you want to make sure that CUB is reasonable as they're applying these codes. And I would say that you have the ability to approach Greg. You have the ability to you know, come to the board if you have a problem. This is not a problem yet. I understand perceptually it's been, and I get it. I've heard all, but right now, as of today, I think this is going to be the best we can do, protecting ourselves while also encouraging development. Because if you take that out, it just doesn't allow us to, it doesn't cover us from a liability standpoint if we needed to step outside these bounds, and there may be very good reasons to do that. I know that may not give you comfort, but
We're not even arguing for ourselves. We're
Gotcha.
arguing for other developers who we face.
well, and I think
So
that
go to North City, they've got lousy engineers down there. They're not even worth their salt. We've got lousy engineers over KUB, we don't have any good engineers here. So we're allowed to raise whatever we want to raise because our good engineers, and these guys aren't good engineers. I'm just saying, all this has safety measures involved. It's just so the board is aware that those are phrases that really hang developers up. But y'all would do that, that's fine.
We've got Todd and Greg and the PEs here for a reason, because of their expertise.
They're good.
Our first direction would be to accept their recommendations as the right way. But if somebody feels strong enough and brings a strong enough case to the board, I would not overrule them without having a third-party independent expert come in.
I don't blame you.
And I think a lot of it, and I've never been on the other end of it or anything, but there seems to be a perception that CUB can be arbitrarily overly strict on some of these things.
Was that, Mr.
No,
Chairman?
that's what I
Because
said. That's just what I said. I started off by saying I don't.
Should we use it as
Yeah.
Mountain Road, Rule 6, y'all both are familiar with it. If you have 6 disconnects, you don't have to have a maximum disconnect on it. We were told that we had to put one in. It's not required. It's not required, there's not a code out there. The total cost figure for this particular scenario cost us $25,000. The exact words when I tried to come up here and work up the ladder to get there was, you will do this, and this is a quote, you will do this or you will not receive power from CUB. When I questioned why, we built a spec building. We wanted to have the ability to add additional meters going forward, which would have killed the power to the building. It would have taken 15, 20 minutes to do that. You all said that you all didn't want to have to pay somebody to go up there every time we wanted to set a new meter. Well, so we have to pay $25,000? We'd be happy to pay the service call to go up there and turn it all off while we set the new meter. We put concrete over trenches that are in solid rock. That's not required in residential development, but it's required now for our industrial buildings. We were not allowed to appeal this. We were told we could not have power if we didn't do this.
Well,
It's the only out of 17 jurisdictions and probably 24 electrical companies we do business with. Only time we've ever run into this. Most of the time they extend it to us and so happy. But so.
well, I can say, Joe, that's
Work this out.
That's easy, because I could say you're the only developer in 40 years that's ever had that problem with us. So, I mean, that's a true statement.
Sir, there's multiple.
No, well, they're not here, and I'm not aware of them. So, I cannot imagine that we would say to you, JD, that we don't want to send a serviceman out there to read a meter or to disconnect it, and that's why you have to have this. But now there is a process in play, and you come to me, and then if I don't satisfy you, then you go to the board.
And then we wait a month to get power.
I don't know what to tell you. If the board is willing to continue on with what they've agreed to, then whatever you have to do in order to follow that process, that'll have to be done, because I'm not going to give you a good feel that we are going to ease off on our requirements for safety and how we do business in that. But I will be able to assure the board that I'll be comfortable to justify everything we do and every process we do it and why we do it.
We just wanted to highlight the case, just so you understand.
I mean, if it's really a tremendous financial impact of waiting a month, as long as we can assemble a quorum, I don't mind coming in here for an issue.
Nor do I.
Nor do I.
You guys have been great. Each of you have been fabulous.
And I think too, we're moving forward. You know, I made some comments earlier that in the past, we can all point to different directions, including at ourselves, but we're living in the solutions and we're living in what we're doing. And I think, I don't want this to end on a sour note, because I feel like tremendous business was worked out here today. Compromise was reached. It seems that there's common ground, and I'm very, very happy and enthusiastic about what's coming tomorrow for CUB. And, not always gonna get everything that we want. I understand those stories, but, you know, I wasn't here. And if I was here, I didn't know about it. And so I can't, you know, but going forward, I think we've got something in place that protects the public, that protects the board, protects the ratepayers, protects the UV.
I just want to make sure folks are obligated to go through Greg. My limited experience says most issues get solved right there. And they don't have to go to the board because they get solved right there.
They'll get solved, right?
Because Steve and I both we've asked people if you talk to Greg, and of course you have, but a lot of the people have not. So it's almost like, well, you need to start there, you know, why? So.
The board has made tremendous progress. You should be terribly proud of yourself. And Greg, you come up with a good policy on the rebate. Not quite as good as we thought before we came in here, but it's still good.
We're still working, Joe. Like I say, we want you to succeed, and the fairness with if you're gonna do the sewer, do the water too, you know, and all of that makes good sense, and we need to get everybody included, and we need an appropriate rate and fees that are in place in order to cover the cost for these things, and they ought to be justifiable.
When you were in the chamber, he discovered that antique in his name. And he discovered it in a really profound way, and he put a billboard out there. And then we got notoriety. And I said, we thought, put a billboard out there. Everybody
What a
laughed.
memory.
You put it out there. Everybody laughed about it for about.
I got ETA to pay for it, buddy.
And we got published in the magazine,
Yeah.
and a second published, and
Yeah.
a third published.
Yeah.
And it's doubled or tripled since then, what they've done. So this is the same thing. You can really publish this as a pro-growth model.
And that's, I think your development will get publicity. Yeah, I mean, that goes well. I mean, that's gonna get some. But I think we need to have some way to give the chamber information, data, whatever, so that they feel comfortable telling developers that they can now come to CUB and deal with CUB. Because, you know, they're the ones who started this whole thing by,
Absolutely. You know, I'm sure they told you guys this, but we're happy to co-host or sponsor, co-sponsor, along the chamber as long as they host it. Big hosting of developers. We could probably 50 developers from around here in and do presentations.
and we'd need to have a good, concise type story that showed them that we are willing to do everything that we can to cooperate, to work with them, to
Some boards like this, in other communities that we operate in, like schools, for example, they have a development office. And they actually sit from the utility, they actually go out and do this for commercial. He does it on industrial all the time, but they go in and do it in commercial residential. And they try to be like the ombudsman to solve the problems. And they'll have a presentation folder and PowerPoint, and they'll go to developers.
I've suggested that here.
It is fabulous. It is fabulous. It will pay for itself in no time.
Somebody that wants to do that. No? Bill Gallagher.
Oh, he'd be great at it.
Yeah, he would.
Well, he does
He would.
workers' comp for all these builders everywhere. He knows it.
Well, that's been resolved in the motion 6. Call the next question.
I think that takes us through all of those questions. And we can go into, that's really their old business, so we can go into the new business.
Great.
Do you have some more things?
I do, because we missed last month, so I've got some things
you.
I'd like to share with you.
Thank you all very much.
And I've
Thank
told
you,
you
JD.
about later, buddy. Okay. I'll be around tomorrow.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson.
I told you about our linemen, so I'm gonna pass on that. Covers recognized Arbor Day Foundation headquartered in Lincoln, Nebraska as a Tree Line USA utility, and this is our 18th consecutive year. And we've got hats and signs and flags, if anybody's interested in a really nice hat, you know, they can wear that. We also hosted which is to your point, which I thought was kind of prophetic. This last Tuesday, well, this was my last month, March the 12th, the Anderson County Leadership Class, we hosted them, the 2019 Leadership Class. There are over 20 participants there, and I put together a PowerPoint presentation highlighting some of Cub's significant accomplishments, which was part of this FLIZR, where we line up, what are the good things we do, and how all of that works. You know, that we're in parts of 6 counties, the number of customers that we have, and some of these other metrics, and our where we fall in with our national records of annual outages and durations. Anyway, it was very good, but I worked hard to get that presentation up, so I'm available to civic organizations too. So that was the first shot at the chamber, which they seemed very receptive to. And so if you've got a place that you think is appropriate, I can come and put the wow factor on them like nobody's, with minimum additional work is what I'm trying to say, because I've already got it up. They toured the Operations Center, and we're now a silver community partner, so they gave us a plaque for that. I went to Washington back in February, and I was with a small contingent from TVA and TVPPA, and I met with individually with Senator Alexander and his staff, and Senator Blackburn and her staff, and our Congressman Flashman and his staff, in order to continue to promote what we're doing, and also the issue of the divestiture of TVA, you know, and the municipal bonds, the tax advantages that we get out of that. So that went very well. The Bull Run Steel Plant, I think most of you, I don't have to go into that. Did you all hear that from the get-go, right? So we can do that. And I received notification from Nashville that our pre-application ARC grant would not be advanced in the application process this year. So that's going to put us a year out before we're eligible again. And they said that they lacked identifiable new jobs and infrastructure. They said weighted against us. So hopefully if Ishan expands, we can leverage that. This affects our water line up the interstate. So it won't be until January, again, until next year, before we have an opportunity to get back to that. And finally, as the chairman of the ETEDA, I have extended an invitation to our commissioner, Governor Lee, put Bob Rolfe in there as Commissioner of Economic Development, and he's going to agree to be our guest speaker at our luncheon in June at ETEDA. And I was just wondering, as I'm sure you are, if I'll have an opportunity at that time to talk to him about water main grant money, which you can assure that I will, so I look forward to that. But that's all that I have. Now you should be 100% up to speed.
Kenny?
Thank
Have
you.
anything?
Do we need to vote on these,
Yeah, that's a good point.
the changes?
Do we need to make, because on that first motion, we made a motion to vote,
And we voted on it, the
and we
first one.
voted on it, but then we didn't. Do you feel like we need to, I mean, I guess,
You know, we voted on number 6. I can incorporate this, again, we're not going to leave anybody hanging on this rebate program, but I can incorporate this extension program into the rebate program, and we can do all that at one time. But if we see anybody new that is coming up, I'll tell them that we're looking to retroactively include them into whatever the final policy that we came in. I don't know if there's anything hanging out there.
and now, you know, we made a motion to approve these motions, subject to his wordsmithing. So I think it's already been approved.
Okay.
And I think all we were doing is agreeing, does that sound good
Yes,
to
sir.
you? And
Yes,
we
sir.
said yes. So I think
I'm just making
everything's,
sure.
yeah, I agree, cause, yeah.
What we need to do. I'm glad that we've come together and, I mean, I feel like we've made great progress. It's been exhausting at times, but I do feel like we are moving in the right direction. And I commend you all of you. Todd, thank you for stepping up, to fill the shoes while we're trying to fill that position. And I also want to say, over the last several months, I've just seen an outpouring of support from CUB employees. And the word that keeps coming up is family. And over the last several months, I've had many phone calls from employees. I've had conversations with various employees, and continuously the word family comes up. Today I called Mike to check on him. I'm not even going to attempt his last name.
Havasset.
And one of the things that he continued to say is, we are overwhelmed. Even my wife has been overwhelmed with the outpouring support of our family. And I think that says numerous kudos to everybody, not just leadership, but the whole CUB in general. Just, wow. I'm just overwhelmed whenever I see how everyone has each other's back here. And I think we are proud of what we have here. I did express from myself, and I don't know if anybody else has spoke to Mike, but from the board, that he was in our prayers and that we appreciated his service. And if there was anything that any of them needed, he or his wife, to let us know. I can't imagine as a wife what she has been through this past week. But kudos to everybody that has reached out to them and just been there to support them through this, what could have been a very devastating experience. So thank you all.
Well said.
You see
just-
that attitude starts at the top. Family attitude starts with that man right there. It always has.
I've said a lot tonight, so just, I'm very proud of the board, very proud of management. I think that, part of, being on a board is having a certain amount of healthy tension. We don't always agree, but, I think there's, that we maintain our, civility and respect each other and continue to build the trust, that we all need. And I'm just proud of management, proud of our employees, and looking forward to getting all this behind us. And Greg, I deeply appreciate, in that email I said it was very short, but deeply appreciate what you've done, the work you've put in. You absolutely captured the spirit of what I was trying to push and what I've been trying to promote. And you're the expert with that. And the last thing is, on that motion 6, we need to have the ability to up the standards if the situation dictates. And that's just, I think it's protects us, and I think it's sound, wise policy. So thank you.
I can always craft it once I know what it is that you wanted. But I am now the undisputed king of PowerPoint. If anybody needs lessons in that, I'm telling you, that is the truth.
I just want to thank Greg publicly tonight.
Thank
I
you.
think exactly what you said, Dan, that the culture and the family starts at the top, and he has set the tone. I think we tend to talk about differences more than appreciation. But I think I speak for the board that we appreciate you. I know I speak for myself.
Thank you.
But appreciate all that you do and the leadership that you provide everybody. Plus, your senior staff is just outstanding. Look forward to the time that you can bring 1 or 2 more on and fill these seats over here. But
Well, I'm going to actively move in that direction.
I think we've had a difficult last few months. I think this has been hard for a board. I think we've been all over the place. I think we've certainly had a full house here last month. I look forward to the future. I hope things settle down around this table. I hope we can look forward to moving together as a board, a strong board. and I hope we can convey that to CUB employees. But when I reached out this week to you, when I heard about the accident, Greg was at the hospital already. So even on top of everything else he does, he was with the family member that needed him the most, so thank you.
Thank you.
Agree with everybody.
Yeah. One other piece of business, our budget is due, or we're supposed to approve our budget June the 1st. So I assume we'll need a proposed budget by the next board meeting. Is that?
Pivot is the word, Charles. We have been overwhelmed. I got to tell you, we really have. The backstory on having all of this has been a challenge. We will do it, and we'll get a copy to you just as quickly as we can for you to review. Generally, it's
Last year, because the
May.
year before, last year, because the year before they wanted to review it a while, we gave them something in May, but they didn't approve it until the June meeting. That's the way
What
we did that.
we'll do is we'll try to get you, we shoot for, and it's July 1 that I think we've got to get, have something fixed. But we'll give you as much as we can, as quick as we can, assuming that the final, because we might want a little workshop or something, as we give you some preliminary stuff, but we'll give you that. I can't do the budget until I figure out what I'm gonna recommend on the rates. And I'm not anticipating anything in electric. It's the water and sewer that's got me the most concerned, because we've got the ACWA rate is gonna come in July 1. So everything we're gonna key is gonna happen in July 1, and that, I needed to get the direction for how these policies that I'm gonna try to carve out, the impact, and a fairly a way to set a rate schedule that's gonna keep us in the black. And I can do it, but again, it's just gonna be, we'll get as much as we can to you, but we'll look to a final approval in June. And as much as we can get to you, even on the rates, if it's all right, which we've gotten used to, is I'll just send you stuff out just to start to digest and get some feedback from that. This is the direction that I'm looking at.
And I think Penny's suggestion of including the salary plan as a budget exhibit, I think that's great, because that covers us, that has it out there. And I agree with all of everything that was said, and it's really, in my opinion, it's okay that we have disagreements, that it's not a uniform board and we all come in with the same background and the same opinions. And as long as we hash the things out and we're civil and respectful for one another, then, I think that's healthy that we do that.
If
And
you
we're getting
follow
a
my
lot of-
lead to be laid back, I think you'll be fine.
And I think the board and CUB are getting a lot of good vibes, good publicity outside, because people recognize that we are trying to address this problem of getting more residential development. And the chamber and the city have been trying to do this for years and haven't made much progress. And most people think that we've made more progress here in the last 6 months than has been made in years before. And it's been a rough 6 months, for sure, but I think good things are coming out of it. So that's all I had. Meeting's adjourned.
Thank you.